In this video, you're going to create your own full stack to-do list with a Chrome extension. So let's sign up for a new account real quick, create a quick password. Here's going to be our to-do list, and at the very top is going to be the Chrome extension. So now that we have the account, we can log in. Here's going to be all of our to-dos, and let's go ahead and add a new one in the Chrome extension. And when we refresh the web page, we can see that it gets added there. But if we complete it in the web page, go to the Chrome extension, we can see that it's complete. But if we add it back again, we can see that it shows up in there. So everything works together. And of course, we have a button that will open the web version of it in the Chrome extension. And of course, we can also sign out if we wanted to. And let's also create an account in the Chrome extension. So I'm just going to write some gibberish in here, but here's going to be the new account. Let's try to log in the web version. So test@gmail.com, and there it is. So let's add some random to-dos. Go to the Chrome extension. We can see that everything gets added. So if you've been looking for a video to level up your web dev skills, then this is the perfect video for that. And without wasting any more time, let's get started. And before we even build anything, I want to give you a quick walkthrough of how we're going to do this. So the very first step is going to be, we're going to create our Next.js project where we're going to have our very basic to-do list, which is going to use local storage. And then we're going to progress from that to a full stack application. And then after that, we're going to create our Chrome extension. So let's start by creating our next to-do list by writing npx create next app at latest, and we're going to call this next to do list and press on enter. I'm going to say yes to this, no to TypeScript, yes to ESLint, yes to Tailwind, no to source directory, yes to app router, no to TurboPack, and no to import alias. And now that it's done, let's cd to our project. So next to-do list, and we can open this in VS Code by writing code space period. And here's going to be our Next.js project. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually open this next to-do list GitHub repository, which is going to be linked down in the description below. We're going to go to the public folder, find this background.svg, download it. So there it is, background.svg, and we're going to drag and drop that inside of the public folder. And I've already downloaded before, so this is going to be 01, which we're going to fix. And that's because this is going to be the background of our to-do list, which you have already seen. And one more thing is going to be the CSS file. So app, and then here we're going to go to globals.css, copy this, and now we can go inside of the app page.js and paste, or not here, sorry, in the globals.css and paste all of that in here. But now let's go inside of our app folder, page.js, and we are going to remove all of this boilerplate code. So let's go ahead and do that right now. And here we're going to have our div with a class name of to-do list, text center, and then of course rounded, or not tounded, but rounded. And here we're going to have another div with a class name of to do content, and inside of this to do content we're going to have an h1 that will say to do list, and we're going to have a class name of text 5XL, font of medium, and margin top of 2. Under the h1 we're going to have another div which is going to have a class name of to dos. And here we will have all of our to-dos, of course. So for now, let's create a variable called to-do. And we are going to return a div, which we will fix in a bit. But here we're going to have our to-do. So to-do. And then here we're going to have our inputs. So class name, add note, and then we're going to set this to be flex. And here we're going to have an input with a class name of width full, px of 4, and py of 2. And then we're going to have a button that will have the plus icon with a class name of text white. We can remove that and write use client because we're going to be using hooks. So let's actually go ahead and import that, use state. Inside of the to-do, the div is going to have a class name of to-do, and then the paragraph will have a class name of text start, padding of 1, and then 2 text 2XL. And let's just write something in here. So let's just say finish work. And now let's run this to make sure that everything works. So npm run dev. And now that it's loaded, we can see that everything works. We have our to-do, our styling work, and then the background SVG also is in the background, and it looks pretty nice. But let's actually work on the functionality. And let's also add a placeholder in here inside of our input. So let's go ahead and close that, find our input, add a placeholder, which is going to say add note, or sorry, add to do. So there it is. And for the to do, and here we're going to be getting props but we can also get them like this. We're going to have our to do, which is going to go in here, and all the other ones to do. So let's write to do, and then in this case it'd be buy milk. We can see our buy milk in there, which means that that works. So we can go back inside of our VS Code, and we're going to create a use state for our to do's and also the input, which we're going to actually do first. So let's just say input, set input. And then we're also going to have the to-do list. So put that in square brackets and then set to-do list, which is going to be an object. So let's remove that. It's going to be an object with incomplete and complete to-dos. So let's go ahead and work on the input. Right over here, we can say that the value is going to be input. Or actually, let's just change this to be to-do input in case we ever add any more inputs, but set to-do input. And let's scroll down in here, change this to to-do input. And then on change, we are going to get the event, and then we are going to set the to-do input to be the event.target.value. And I forgot to mention that we can see the button by pressing on inspect and changing the dimensions. So there it is. And let's also add another event listener, which is going to be on key down. Remove the curly brackets. So event, and then here we can write e.key equals to enter. Then we are going to add to do, which we will create in just a second. So not sure what this is, but add to do. Let's go up in here, create our add to do. So const add to do. And here we're going to be checking if to do input dot length equals to 0. And if so, we will return. Then we are gonna write to-do list. So to-do list dot incomplete dot push, and then the to-do input. So we're gonna be adding the to-do input inside of the to-do list hook when we press on add to do. And then of course we want to set our to do input to be blank right after that. And this is going to be it for the add to do, or almost it, because we do have to save it to local storage, which we're going to do in just a second after everything actually works. But what we're going to do is actually run a mapping method on our to-dos. So right in here, we can remove this, and we're going to write to-do list dot complete. So the complete to-do lists are going to be at the top, which is why we're doing them first, dot map, and then we're going to be getting our to-do with the index. And the reason we're getting the index is going to be for the key, which we do have to also pass in. So here we're going to have our to-do. Let's close this. I'm not sure why we're getting an error. That's because of the key. So key is going to be index. To-do is going to be to-do. To-do list is going to be to-do list, of course. Then we're going to have our set to-do list, and then is done right over here. In this case will be true. Let's go ahead and copy and paste it down. Change this to incomplete, and we're going to set is done to be false in here. Let's remove the spacing and make it all to be in one line. So just like this. And now if we go back and try to add anything and press on enter, we can see our to-do over here. Of course, we can add as many as we want and our to-dos work, but of course we do have to add the functionality that whenever we press on a to-do, it actually gets removed when we refresh, or in this case, if we refresh, everything gets removed. But let's add the functionality to finish a to-do real quick. So here, const done to do, and we're going to write it inside of the paragraph. So on click, we are going to run done to do, but this is going to be pretty simple. Here we're going to check if we are done. So is done, which we have to get from here. So let's just change this to props, and then here we're going to be getting the to-do list, of course, set to-do list, and is done, which will be equal to props. And I'm not sure why I misspelled that, but if is done, then we're going to return, because if we're done, then we shouldn't be able to press on our to-do again to finish it again, because it's already finished. But here we're going to be creating a new list, which is going to have our incomplete, which will be to-do list dot incomplete dot filter. Here we're going to be getting our current to do, and I'll go over this in just a second, but our current to do, and we're going to be checking that our current to do doesn't equal to do. Then we have our complete, which is going to be the to do list dot complete, and then of course our new to do. And let's go in here, and we're going to set our to do list to be the new list, and this should be it for the done to do. And so the way that this works is we're setting all of the incomplete to-dos inside of the new list to be all of the incomplete to-dos inside of the to-do list, of course. But we're also going to be filtering out all of the to-dos inside of the incomplete. And what I mean by that is we're going to be checking every single to-do. And if the text matches, then we're going to be removing it. And then for the complete, we're going to be setting it to the previous completes, but we're also going to be adding our current to-do. So hopefully this made any sense, but I'm going to put this all into one line. Let's do that. And before we check if this works, let's go to our paragraph over here and let's cut this out. because we're going to be adding some styles. So let's put this in here, and we're going to check if is done equals to true. Then we're going to add a class name called done, else we're not going to be adding anything. So now if we go back in here and try to add our to-dos, we're getting an error. So is done is not defined. So let's go back in here, check is done. We do have is done, but for some reason we are getting an error. That's because I forgot to capitalize the D. So let's refresh and we can see that everything is working. But if we press only to do, it goes to the very top and it has a line through it. But of course, when we refresh, nothing actually stays because we haven't added the functionality to save it inside local storage. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So let's go to our add to do. And what we're going to do over here is we're also going to be adding this to local storage. So we're going to write local storage dot set item to be to-dos. And this will be set to JSON.stringify and then to-do list dot incomplete because we only want to be saving our incomplete to-dos. And then now if we add a to-do, so for example, finish work, and we open our developer console by right-clicking, inspect, going to application, we're going to make this larger. If we go to local storage, and here we're going to see our to-dos with our to-do, which is going to be finish work. But of course, if we refresh, it's gone, which means that we're going to have to get that data somehow, and that's where use effect comes in. So use effect, and in here we are going to set this to work whenever we load the page, but we're going to check if there's an item. So local storage dot get item do's. So let's go in here and we're going to say if there's no local storage dot get item to do's, then we are going to return. And if it does exist, then we're going to set the incomplete array here of our to-dos to be the ones that are saved in local storage. So we're going to write incomplete will be JSON.parse, and then of course local storage dot get item to-dos. And we're going to set the complete to be an empty array. And that's going to be it for the use effect. So let's see what happens if we refresh. We're going to be getting an error. JSON.parse not a function. I misspelled this again. So parse. So there we go. Here's going to be our finished work. And of course, if we press on it, it's going to be done. But if we refresh, we can see that it's back again. And that's because we also have to add it in here. So where we have our to do. But it's a very simple fix. So we can go in here and write local storage dot set item to do's to be JSON.stringify new list dot incomplete, and that should be it. So if we refresh, we can see our to-do still here, but if we press on it and refresh again, we can see that our to-do is gone. And now let's actually test if this works. So I'm going to add a bunch of different to-dos. So there they are. Let's go ahead and add a few random ones. So I'm just going to do these three over here. We can see that they're going to be at the very top, but as soon as I refresh, they're gone. So that just means that our to-do list works. In this video, we're going to be converting our previously made to-do list into a full stack application. So let's go ahead and actually sign up. I'm going to set my name to Bob. Email address is going to be webdevwithron@gmail.com. And the password, we're going to just set this to 123. And as we can see, here is our to-do list. We did add a few features, and one of them would be if you misclicked a to-do, now you're able to add it back if you ever needed to. And of course, if you had, for example, two to-dos that were the same, so let's just say finish work, and then you had something else like do homework, and then you have to finish your work again and reload, the other one doesn't get removed also, so we can do all of that. But of course, if we log out and then we log back in again, everything gets saved. And of course, it's not going to be in the local storage anymore. It's going to be in the database. So let's refresh. And over here, if we go to to-dos, here are going to be all of our to-dos, and everything is being saved. So make sure that you watch this whole video, because at the very end we are going to be fixing some things and also adding some features. But we're going to go back to the next to-do list, and this is going to be the latest commit in this example, so make sure you choose the right one. And we're going to copy the globals.css and paste it in here. We're also going to download two more SVGs, so go to the public folder and find the signout.svg. And now we're going to drag and drop it inside of our public folder. So what I'm going to do is have them side by side like this. And the first thing that we're going to do is actually clean this up, because we have our to do over here at the bottom, and then of course the actual to-do list container. So of course we don't want any of that. Let's go ahead and create a new folder called components, and we're going to have a file in here called index.js, and you're going to see why this file is going to be useful later on. But we're going to create our to-do.js, and then let's just write export default function to do, and then we're going to have our props in here. So let's go down to the very bottom, copy all of this, paste it in here. And I'm gonna go ahead and also copy the props. So we can just copy this. And then of course we're gonna paste them right in here. And we're gonna get an error because we can see that to-do has already been declared. That's because we have them at the very bottom over here. And we're gonna go to the index.js and write import to-do from to-do. And we're also gonna export to-do, just like that. So let's go ahead and remove this to-do from the very bottom. And then at the very top, we're going to import to-do from components, and hopefully everything should work again. So there it is. And before we actually add our database and that kind of stuff, one thing you want to fix is to go to the to-do, and then here, I'm going to close that. We're going to change or add something to the class. So the first thing that we're going to do is, hold on, let's just create a to-do. So the first thing that we're going to add is a cursor pointer, and we're going to cut this out, paste it back in here, and we're going to check if it's done. So is done equals to true. Then we're also going to add a done in here, else it's going to be blank. So you'll see why in a second. So when we press on it, it turns to gray so that we can see the difference between the ones that are done and are not. And we have this in both of them. So what I'm going to do is go to the globals.css, search up to do, and over here to do where, and then let's see what we have in here. So we have a paragraph with a to do. So to do paragraph. So there it is. I'm just going to cut this out, and then wherever we have the to do dot done, what I'm going to do is actually go down here, paste this in here, but we're going to change this to do dot done and then paragraph, so that we wouldn't need the paragraph to also have a class of done for this to work. So now we can remove this, and it should work the exact same way. So when we press on that, we have a line through, and something happened there, but yeah, there we go. So that's actually another thing that we're going to have to fix. So if we have two to-dos with the same name or same text, it's going to cancel both of them out because there's no IDs or that kind of stuff which we could use to differentiate them, but we're going to have all of that whenever we're done with our database. So let's go ahead and start with that. As always, we're going to create our new environment file here, so .env. And we're going to have two variables. So one is going to be mongodb underscore URL. The other one is going to be the JWT secret underscore key. And of course, all this is in my login signup template. So if you want to go ahead and watch that whole video and learn about how all of this stuff works, because I'm not going to be able to go over all of this in too much depth, then you can go ahead and do that. But we can close this for now. And we're going to actually open MongoDB Atlas. So I'm going to open it and write MongoDB Atlas. And we're going to log in or sign up with Google. And of course, if you don't already have an account, then make sure that you create an account and then you create a cluster. So this right here. And we can see that mine is currently paused because I haven't used it in a while, but of course this doesn't really matter. Once you actually have your cluster, if you haven't watched my previous videos, then make sure you go to network access and then set the IP address to this, which will give you access to access the database from anywhere if you have the right credentials. But we're going to go to clusters, connect, drivers, and then we're going to copy this right here. Now we're going to go back to the environment file, paste in the MongoDB URL. Can actually make this larger. And let's press on done. We're going to go to database access. And then if you don't have a database user, make sure you add one. And then you press on add built-in role, Atlas admin, and create your password over here. And then the name, for me, it's going to be admin. And every time I actually edit the password, generate a new one, and then I copy it. Now press on update user, because over here we can see that this is where the username would go. And then here would be the password. So that's the password that was just generated. And so now we can go back to the cluster, browse collection. And this is going to be the collection from the previous video, which was the login signup template. And we can see that all the passwords are hashed and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and actually leave it. And we're going to create a new database. We're going to call this to-do list DB. You can call it however you want. You can just do to-do list. You can do to-do DB, doesn't matter, but make sure that you actually remember it. So let's just do to-do list and then underscore DB. Collection name is just going to be users. And I'm going to copy this, press on create. And here is our collection of to-do list DB and users. And now in here, we're going to remove all of this up to the question mark, and then we're going to paste in the name of to-do list DB or whatever name you chose. And for the JWT secret key, I'm just going to set this to 123 for now because we're not going to be using it right now. But now we can close the environment file, and we're going to go ahead and create our folders. So the first one is going to be dbconfig, which is going to have a file of index.js. So let's go back to the dbconfig, index.js, and then here we're going to be connecting to the database. And to do that, we do have to install a new dependency. So npm install, and we're going to be installing Mongoose. So let that install. And once it's done, we can go ahead and run import Mongoose from Mongoose. And then here we're going to create our async function, which we're going to be using in our API endpoints to connect to the database. So connect. And then here we're going to have a try and catch method in case we have any errors along the way. So here we're just going to console log the error. We can do err error. And then here we're going to write mongoose.connect. And here is where our environment file comes from. So process.env. Let's just go back in here, copy this, and then paste it right in here. MongoDB URL. Then we're going to create a variable called connect, which is going to be a mongoose connection. So mongoose.connection. Just like that. And then here we're going to write connect.on connected. So when it's connected, we're going to console log that, or let's fix this. We're going to console log, let's fix all of these errors, but we're going to console log connected to MongoDB. I'm going to uncapitalize the T over here. And then we're going to have another one, which would be on an error. So .on error. We're going to be getting in the error, and then we're going to be console logging the error. And another thing that we're going to do is actually we're going to disconnect. So process.exit. And this is going to be it for the dbconfig. We're going to close the app, the dbconfig, and we're going to create another folder called models. And this is going to be the most interesting part here out of this whole setup before actually using the database. But of course, here we're going to be creating our user model. So user model.js. And of course, here we're going to be importing Mongoose from Mongoose. And the first thing that we're going to do is create our user schema, which is going to be a new mongoose.schema. And here we're going to have all of our different variables. So for this project, we're going to have their name, which will be a string. Then we're going to have an email of string, just like that. I'm not sure what's going on, but email of string, password of string. And then we're going to have our to-dos, which is going to be an array of to-do schema. And this to-do schema is going to be another schema that we're going to create above. So const to-do schema, which is going to be new mongoose.schema. And so we're going to have our to-do with a string. And then, of course, we're going to have our ID, which will be a number. Now that we have both of our schemas, we're going to create our user, which is going to be mongoose.models.users. And if we don't have any of that, then we're going to create it. So mongoose.model, mongoose.model, and then we're going to go to users and then user schema. And then under that, all that we're going to do is export default user. And this will be it for the user model. And later on, we are going to have to make another one, which is going to be the helpers for the JWT token, but we're going to do that later on. So now let's go to the app folder, create our API folder, and start working on the APIs and actually creating our sign up and login pages. Before we go ahead and work on the API, we're going to go ahead and create our sign up page first. So sign up. Here we're going to create a page.js file. And we're going to go ahead and copy this from the Next.js signup login template. You can find this in the description below. So go to app, sign up, page.js, and copy this file. We're going to paste it in here, and let's see if it worked. So we're going to go to sign up, and there it is. And so we're going to go back, and we're getting an error, and it's something to do with Axios, as we can see over here. So what we're going to do is go in here and run npm install Axios, which should solve the error. So let's reload. And now we're back. So sign up to your account, email, address, password, and we're actually missing the name. So let's go ahead and add it in here. Scroll down. And for the name input, we're just going to go ahead and copy this right here and then paste it above it. And here we're going to change this to name. All of this, so email, we're going to change this to name, and then here we're going to set the name to target and then user.name. That should be it. So if we write something in here, okay, it's all going to be different, so that works. And if we go to the handle submit, I'm going to go over this real quick, but all that's happening here is we're checking that user.email and user.password are not empty. So now we're going to add user.name. So if none of the inputs are empty, then we're going to do this. Else, we're going to set an error message. And this error message is just going to be the text. But if we scroll somewhere here, error message. So this span right here would be the error message. So let's say we had one that doesn't have anything in it, and we press on sign up. We're going to get this error message of please fill all the fields, and we set it up over here. So please fill all the fields. So this is going to be for the error message, and we can say else no user.name. But here we're setting the error message to blank in case we had one before. So if we comment this out, we can see that we have the error message, and then now if we press on sign up, we're still going to have an error message because we didn't clear it. So if we do this again, we can see that the message disappears. And here we're going to have a response. So we're sending an API request to API signup. And then of course we're sending in the user. Then if response.status equals to 200, then we're going to be pushing the user to the home page. But of course, if we should be getting an error somewhere here. So if we inspect, go to console, not sure what's going on here, but 404 not found. So of course we have to create that API endpoint. So sign up in the API folder. Here we're going to have our route.js file, and we can create this one from scratch. So unless you want to go ahead and also copy and paste it from the same repository, but here we're going to start by importing next response, and then we're going to export const host, which is going to be an async function. We're going to be getting in the request, and then actually we do have to import a few more things. So of course we got to import connect from mongoose or dbconfig, and then we're going to be import the user from user model. And then for bcrypt.js and gwt, we're going to work on that in a bit, but of course first thing that we have to do is connect to the database. So connect. We're going to run our try and catch method as always in case we get any errors. Here we're going to console log error, and then we're going to return a next response.error. But the first thing that we're going to be getting is the name, email, and password that we are passing. So password, which will be await request.json. Let's go ahead and console log all of them. So console.log, name, email, and password, and then we're going to return a next response, or else we're going to have an error.json. And then here we're just going to write a message of user created successfully, and then we're going to pass in a status of 200, which we're going to be looking for in there. Let's go back into the page, and we're not going to be pushing the user yet because we want to see if this works. So the name, let's just say web dev. Email address would be 123@gmail.com. Password was also 123. And now if we press on sign up, we're getting all of our values. So webdev 123@gmail.com and then 123. So now that that works, we can go back to the route.js file. And the first thing that we're going to do, or actually before we do that, we can see that connected to MongoDB worked, because in the environment file, again, it's using this URL to access it. And if it's not working, then make sure that your username and password are correct and that you actually have this database and collection. But we're going to close this. And the first thing that we're going to do is create a user variable, which will check if we have a user. So await user dot find one with the email. And if we do have a user with that email, then we're going to want to go ahead and respond. So if user, we're going to return a next response.json with a message of user already exists, and then with a status of 400. So if we don't have a user already with that email, here we're going to create our const new user, which would be new user. Of course, here we're going to have the name, email, password, and then we're going to have our to-dos. We can actually create a few basic ones so that whenever a new user signups for the first time, they have a few default to-dos. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. We're going to have one with a to-do of create your first to-do, and then it's going to have an ID of 1. And we're going to create a few more later on, but this is going to be good enough for now. And now that we have all of this, if we go ahead and console log this user, so new user, let's reload everything. Webdev with ron@gmail.com, password 123. This right here would be a user, so we can see that our password is just straight up 123. Name and email is fine. To do is also fine, but again, this is just not right. We should not have a password of 123. And actually, we don't need to add the IDs in here. We can just close that. So let's reload everything. Do this again. Let's see, we have webdev with Ron 123. And yeah, there we go. So we have our to do and we have one ID. So we're gonna go push it back in the models and fix this. This should be underscore ID. So now what we're going to do is use a tool called bcrypt.js, which is going to allow us to hash the password. Well, let's go ahead and install it. Bcrypt, make sure they spell this right, bcrypt.js, and we're going to press on enter. And so I'm not going to go too much in depth of how it works because I have a whole separate video on how to create a sign up and login page and all that kind of stuff. So you can go ahead and take a look at that video, but you're going to see what it does in just a second. So the first thing that we have to do is create a salt. So salt, which would be bcrypt.bcrypt.js. So fix this, bcrypt.js, bcrypt.js dot generate salt, and we're gonna put 10 in here. That just means 10 different rounds. And then we're gonna have our final hash password over here. Hashed password, which would be await bcrypt.js.hash our password salt. So there we go. For some reason this async is not working, and that's because we have to add an await in here. And now if we set the password to be the hashed password, we're going to see a large difference. So if we press on sign up again, we can see that now our password is hashed, and it would be insanely difficult for a hacker to actually get the password. And so, of course, this makes it a lot more secure just in general. So now that we have our full users, so name, email, a hashed password, and to-dos with a default to-do, and of course the ID, we can go ahead and actually save that user. So to do that, we're going to write await new user .save. And now that we have that, let's do this again. So sign up. And of course, it's not going to redirect us because we commented it out. But now if we press on sign up again, we're going to get a user already exists, because if we go back to MongoDB Atlas and refresh, we can see our first user. So that means that our page, of course, is working, but we do have to make a login page. So let's go ahead and actually just work on the login page. So login, and we're going to go back to here, go to app, login, and login is a lot more simpler than sign up. So we can go ahead and actually just copy and paste the login page.js. There it is. And then we can go to API, login, route.js, copy that too. And of course, I'll go over it too. So login, and then we're going to have our route.js pasted in here. So of course, we're going to have our email and password coming from the page. And here we're going to check if we have a user using the email. And if we don't, then we're going to say that the user does not exist. So if it doesn't find any users with the email provided, then it's going to give us this error message. Now it's going to validate our password using bgrip.js. So it's going to use a function called compare, which is going to use the password that we have passed down from the page, and then the hash password. So pretty much just compares the password. And if we're getting a false in here, then we're going to pass in a next response with invalid password and a status of 401. And then here, we're going to be actually creating a token, which we also have to do in the signup. And I'm going to go over that in a second, but here is where we're using the JWT secret key. And that's something that you want to keep a secret to yourself or your organization or that kind of stuff. But you want to make sure it's a secret so that it wouldn't be easy for hackers to actually break into someone's account. But of course, I'm just going to set this to gibberish. You can set this to whatever you want, but make sure that you write it down whenever you actually make your own website and upload it. But here we're going to be creating a variable called token data, and then it's using the ID of the user. So if the user wasn't found, then it's just going to return the next response. But if it was found, then we're going to create this token data with the ID of the user, the JWT secret key, and then we're going to have this variable called expires in 1 day. So in 1 day, this is going to be expired, and the middleware file is going to be checking all that stuff. But again, we're going to leave it like this for now. So now we do actually have to install another library, and that's another dependency, which is JSON Web Token. So npm install JSON Web Token. While that's installing, we're going to go to the signup and also create that token. So over here, after we save it, we're going to do the same thing. So const token data, and that would be JWT dot sign. And again, all of this stuff, I have a separate video on that, so you can go ahead and watch it if you want to. What is going on? Let's just import it from here. So import JWT, and then here we write JWT sign. We're going to set this to be ID, and then that would be equal to the user dot underscore ID. And we're going to be passing the process dot environment dot JWT. I'm just going to copy it, paste it in here. And then we're going to set expires in to be 1 day. And then now we're going to be creating a response variable instead of just passing it. So, and you'll see why in a second, but next response dot JSON. We can actually just go ahead and copy this. So there it is. And then here we're going to be returning the response. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take the response and we're going to set the cookies. So cookies.set, and it's pretty much the same with cookies like local storage. So local storage.set, cookies.set, variable is going to be called token. And then the value of token is going to be the token data. And then we're also going to set HTTP only to be true. And so now, if we sign up or log in, this should work. So if I used a different email, Ron's, and we pressed on sign up, we see that we get redirected to the home page. And then if we go to application cookies, we have our cookies, so token, and then this right here. Now, if we do the same and we go to the login page, let's say I do some random characters at gmail.com, and then I set the password to be 123. If we press on login, we see that we get user doesn't exist because there's no user with this email. So now if we did web dev with Ron, I'm just going to copy this, go back in here, web dev with Ron, and I did a wrong password, so 1234, invalid password. So 123, and now we get the right password and our token is created. So we can see that this works, but of course we can go back to the login page if we wanted to, or to the sign up page. And let's say we weren't even logged in, right? We can still go to the home page. So to fix that, we have to create our middleware file. So we're going to go back in here and create our middleware file.js, and here we're going to start by exporting a middleware file, which would be an async function. And then here we're going to start by getting the path that we're currently on. So const path. And of course, if you don't want to create this file from scratch, you can go back in here and then find the middleware somewhere in here. I'm not exactly sure. Let's go back. It should be somewhere in here. So there, the middleware.js file. You can go ahead and copy it and paste it and then see the changes that we're going to make. But I'm going to create it from scratch. So const path, which should be request.nextURL.pathName. And then here we're going to create a variable called isPublicPath, which is going to check if the path that we're on is public. So if the current path is going to be at login or at signup, then it's going to be true, else it's going to be false. And you'll see why we need this in a bit. But now we're going to create a variable called token, which is going to get our cookies. So request.cookies.get. We're going to get a token dot value. And so this right here is checking if we have a value in token. So we might have a token and for some reason the value is set to nothing, or we don't have a token and of course it's not going to be a value. But if it doesn't find any of this, then we're just going to set this to be nothing or blank. And now we're going to be checking if we're in a private path. So let's say this homepage right here, this can be a private path and we don't have a token. Then what we're going to want to do is return a next response. So next response dot redirect to a new URL, and that would go to login and request.url. Of course, you can set this to sign up if you want, but we're going to set this to login for now. But else, if we're in a public path and we have a token, so this is the same thing but just flipped, then we're going to go back to the home page. And now we have to do one more thing, and that would be going and writing export const config. And then here we're going to have a matcher with all of the URLs that we want this to work on. So we're going to have the homepage, login, and sign up. Let's see if this works. So right now, if we go to the application, we have no token, but if we create one by logging in, we can see that it's going to redirect us back, but we can't go to the login page anymore, or we can. And that's because of this, I'm pretty sure, but hold on, let's see. If we remove this token and we try to go back to the home page, it doesn't let us, but it lets us do it the other way around. And that's because we're missing something. That's my fault. We have to create a function called isToken expired. Then we're going to write token. So here we're going to have a try and catch method. Error, we're just going to return true. If the stuff that we're doing here doesn't work, that just means that the token is expired. So const decoded token, this will be JWT decode token. And this is actually another thing that we have to install, which we're going to do in a second. And here we're just going to return an answer. So return decoded token dot expiration, or exp, is smaller than date dot now divided by 1000. And here we're going to write is public path and no is token expired token. And of course we have to install this, so we're going to write JWT decode, so npm install JWT, and we're going to have an underline here, and this should not be capitalized. So this is what the dependency looks like. So now we can install that, and hopefully everything will work now. So let's reload, try to go to the home page, redirect us back to the login page. But if we log in, of course, we're going to go back to the home page. But now if we try to go to the login page, it's still going to let us. So, and of course it didn't work because we have to import JWT code. So I'm pretty sure we got an error somewhere, but let's reload everything and try to do this again. Okay, now if we go back to the login page, it's still going to let us do it. So I'm just not exactly sure what's going on in here. This had to be in curly brackets. And then we need 2 of those in both of them. Let's see if it works now. So if we go to the login, it's going to redirect us back to the home page if we're logged in. But now if we delete this and reload and we try to go back to the home page, it's not going to let us. And one more cool thing that we can do is actually just go back in to the login and sign up. And then over here where we're setting the cookies, we can, here where we're setting the cookies, and we're setting HTTP only to be true, we can set the max age of the cookie to be something, and it's going to be in seconds. So just going to do this. So it's pretty similar to, where is it at? This expires in, but expires in is used when you want this to be an exact date, and then max age is pretty much a countdown from whenever the cookie is set. So if we set this to be 10, that would mean that in 10 seconds this would expire, but let's just set it to 5, for example. Let's see how that would work. So if we load everything, let's actually do this for sign up and login. So let's do that. We're going to go to login, of course, refresh, login. Here's going to be our token. And after some time, now if I refresh, we can see that it's gone. And if we refresh the page, we're going to go back in here. And so of course this is set to 5 seconds, like I said before. So if we do 60 times 60 times 24, this would be equivalent to 24 hours. So it would have seconds and then times minutes, minutes times hours, and that would give us a day. And let's just go ahead and do this in both. So login and then also sign up. So there we go. And of course you can choose whichever one you want. So max age or the expires in. And I'm going to keep it like this because this would just override that unless this is smaller than the max age, but hopefully you get the point. And now that we are finished with that, let's actually go ahead and add our to-dos inside of the database, because currently if we add one, so let's just say add note and open the developer console, go to application, local storage, we can see that right over here we have our to-dos and then add note. So if we type anything in here, press on enter, we can see that that also gets added. And there's actually one more thing that we're also going to fix, and that's by adding IDs. So if we type in, let's just say ASD and then another ASD, we can see that obviously they're going to have the same content, but if we remove one, the second one also gets removed just because they have the same name, and that's how the system works. So we're going to be using IDs so that this doesn't happen. But the first thing that we're going to do is remove local storage from our page.js. So right here, we're going to remove this. And then inside of our to-do.js, we have to do the exact same thing also. So let's go ahead and do that. And the first thing that we're going to do is import Axios from Axios, just like that. And we're going to go to our add to do. And of course, we're going to go to our add to do. But before we do that, let's turn this into an async function. And then we're going to add a try and catch method right over here. Error, as always, in case we get any errors. And it's asking me if I want to fix it, which I do, but we're going to do it manually. So console log error, and then we're going to move this right over here, just like that. And one thing that we're going to do is remove this, because here we're just going to write await axios.post. And then here we're going to be going to API, to-dos, and then add, which we haven't created yet, but we will. And then we're going to have our to-do, which will be the to-do input. And you're going to see why we do this in a second, because we're going to be creating another function called get data. And then every time that we add a to-do, we're going to call this function, which will get us the data. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to manually create the ID, because whenever you create an object, as we can see over here, a new ID gets created, so it's a lot easier to just do that. And of course, receive all the data again with the new ID and that kind of stuff instead of creating it here. So for now, this is how it's going to work. And of course, we have to make an API endpoint for that. So we're going to go to API to-dos. and then we're going to have a folder called add, and of course we're going to have a route.js file. And here we're going to start by importing next response, and then we're going to import connect from dbconfig. Let's connect to the database, and then we're going to export a const post function, which will be an async arrow function with a request, and in here, as always, try and catch method. So try catch error, and here we're going to return a next response.error, and also console log the error. And so here the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to see if we have a cookie, because if we don't, then we shouldn't be able to do any of that. So const ID, and that's going to be the ID from the token that we're going to be getting. So await get token data, and if I'm not mistaken, we don't have that right now because we haven't added that yet. So we have to create this function. So let's close the app for now, and then we're going to create a function called helpers. And inside of helpers, we're going to have a function called get token data.js, and here we're going to import next response, not request but response, and then also import JWT from JSON Web Token, and then we're going to export the get token data function with the request, and of course we're going to have a try and catch method as always, where we will console log the error and then return a next response.error. And then here we're going to create a variable called token, and we're going to be getting that from the cookies.get token, and we're going to check if we have a value in there. But if we don't, then we're just going to set it to be blank, and then we're going to be decoding the token. So decode token equals to jwt.verify token, and then we're going to use the process.env.jwt. Just going to go in here, copy this down, and then of course we will return the decoded token.id, just like that, or ID. There we go. Now if we go into our roy.js, let's go ahead and fix that. So route.js, after we get our token, we're going to try to find a user using the ID that was saved inside of our cookies. So await to user, which we do also have to import, .find by ID, should be a lot simpler, .select, and you'll see what we're doing here in just a second, but password or null. Right over here, we're getting the user by the ID. And so by writing .select and then password, what we're saying here is we don't want to get the password. And so here we're going to check if the user exists. So if no user, then we're going to return a next response.json with a message of user not found, and then status of 400. And then right over here, let's console.log the ID. And then also under that, we're going to console log the user. And then right over here, we will return a next response, which isn't going to have anything in there for now, but we're just going to say message to do added successfully and status of 200, just so that we can take a look at this without getting any errors. So let's go back in here, add note, we're just going to type something, and we're going to be getting an error right now. So ID await get token data. So of course we have to import this. Hopefully that will work now. So let's do the exact same thing. And there we go. So as we can see, the ID from our cookies matches the ID of our user. So of course it gets saved inside of the cookies, and then we're getting it from there. And then we're trying to find a user with the ID. And if we take a look over here, we can see that we do not have a password, and that's because we added this parameter in here. So if we set this to be, for example, _ID and do the exact same thing, add note, we can see that we're getting our user without the ID, but now we have the password. But of course we do want the ID, we don't want the password, so we're just going to do that, and everything should go back to normal. And before we go on, we have to fix a few more things, or else we will have a bunch of issues. So if we go to API, sign up, and then route.js, in here we will remove the default to do just for now. We will add a few other ones later on. Then if we go to models, user model.js, in here we have to change this to mongoose.schema. So schema.types and then object ID. And now in here, we're going to be getting our to-do from await request.json, and we're also going to be getting an ID, but we will only be getting an ID if it's from a to-do list that already existed. So what this means is whenever you click on a to-do, so for example, we had a to-do that said finish work. Let's say you press on it by accident and you didn't want to actually remove it. We're going to add a feature that you can press on a completed to-do, which will uncomplete it. And this to-do is already going to have an ID, so there's no reason to create another to-do with the same text and then a new ID. So we're just going to be passing in the to-do and the ID. But if we don't actually have an ID, then we're not going to be passing it, and then we're going to be creating it. So of course, we're going to create const new to-do, which would be dependent on the ID. So if we have an ID, make sure to not forget the underscore, then the to-do will be to-do plus the ID. Else, we're going to create a to-do with the to-do being the to-do, and then the ID will be new mongoose. Make sure you import this from mongoose. So there it is, dot types, dot object, ID, and then round brackets, just like that. Now in here, we're going to get the user dot to-dos, fix this, and then we're going to set that to be the previous user dot to-dos, but we will add the new to-do, and of course await user dot save. And let's also write over here console.log our user.todos to see if this worked. So I'm gonna remove the cookie, reload, and over here I'm gonna delete everyone. So delete, and we're gonna start from scratch. So sign up, name is gonna be web. This is gonna be the email address, password is 123, sign up, and let's create our to-do. So let's just say finish work. Of course, we're not gonna see it, but if we go back in here, we're gonna have our to-do with a newly generated ID. And I just commented the ID out just so that you can see the difference. So this right here would be with the ID of new mongoose.types.object ID, and this one would be without it. So without it, it wouldn't create the ID. So that's just to show you how that works. But I'm gonna go to the to-dos and remove this guy right over here. So update, and of course we're gonna have our to-do, the one to do with the actual object ID. So there we go. Now we have to work on actually showing the to-dos. So this part is done. We can remove the console log, and we can go back to the to-dos and create a new folder called get. Here we're going to have a route.js file, and in there we're going to start from scratch again. So import next response, import connect, and then import user, and then we have another one which go back, import get token data, get token data, and then now over here we can export const get function, sync with the request, try and catch method as always. So here we're going to console log the error and then return a next response.error. And right over here we're going to do the same thing as we did over here. So we can actually just go ahead and copy this just like that, and then since all that we're doing is actually getting the user without the password, of course, we can just go ahead and return a next response.json with the to-dos of being user.todos. Or what we can do is actually send in the full user. Let's also send a message. So right over here, we can say that user is found, or we can say anything else, but let's actually just not send any message. And of course, we're going to have our status 200. But now, actually, we do have to connect to the database over here. So connect. And of course, now we can go back to the page.js file and fix anything else that we have to fix. So of course, right over here, we're going to create a function called getData, which will be an async arrow function. Of course, try and catch whenever we have anything to do with backend error. And then here we're going to console log the error. And then we're going to have our response await axios.get. This will be going to API and then to-dos, and of course get. And then right over here, what we're going to do is we're going to set user, which we do not have. So let's go ahead and fix our use states. So I'm going to create a new one called user, and then set user, which will be use state. And right over here, we're going to have all of our variables. So of course, we're going to have the name, which will be blank. Then we're going to have email, which will also be blank. And then we're going to have our to-dos. And since this is not exactly going to be what we're getting from the database, we can have our to-dos be an object with an array of incomplete and complete to-dos. So incomplete, and then our complete. So right, just like this. And of course, if you want to, you can do something like this, which will make it look nicer. Of course, here's our to-do with the incomplete and complete. And now we should be able to remove the to-do list, but let's see where we're actually using it. So of course, we're using it here, right over here. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to fix. But first of all, what we're going to do is go in here and we're going to set user right over here. We're going to set this to response.data.user. But then for the to-dos, that's going to be a lot different. So right over here, incomplete will be set to response.data.user.todos, just like that. And then complete will just be blank, or actually we can set this to ... user.todos.complete. And this might look a little bit confusing, but I'm going to go over this one more time. So we're setting our users to be stuff from response.data.user. So stuff like the name and email will be set automatically. Before the to-dos, here where we have the incomplete, what we're doing here is we're setting the incomplete to be all of the data that we have stored in the database. But for the complete ones, we're setting that to be to-dos from this use state that we have. So we're going to set that to be complete. And the reason we're doing this is because right over here, we're going to be getting the data every time we add a user. So you're going to see how this works in just a second. And it's showing me that we have an error or something, but everything is fine. So what we're going to do is wherever we have our use effect, we're going to write get data. And then right over here, we are going to console log the user, not the to-do list. So fix all of this. Let's reload, go to our console, and here's our user. So we have email, name, and we have our to-do. So of course the complete is not going to be, it's going to be empty for now. But for the incomplete, we have our to-do and the ID. If we add another to-do and we check again, we should still only have one to-do in the incompletes, and that's because we haven't updated it whenever we add a new to-do. So right over here, what we're going to do at the very bottom, we're just going to write get data, just like that. And actually if we reload right now, we should have two to-dos right over here. So if we create one, which will just be ABC, and scroll down to-dos, we're going to see our latest to-do ABC. But now if we actually just comment this out, I'm not sure if we're going to be getting an error, but let's find out. So we have no error, which means we can remove this. But now we're going to work on this part right over here. So what I'm going to do is actually just erase all of this and go over this from scratch, because there's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to fix. We're going to start with the complete ones because we want the complete ones to be at the very top. So user.todos.complete.map. Here we're going to be getting the to-do and the index. And then right over here, we're going to be returning a to-do. So right here, to-do with a key, which will be the index. And let's actually close it so there's no errors, but we can actually create a variable which will be the props, and that will be stuff like the actual to-do, user, set user, and then is done. Okay, so actually is done will be set to true in this case, but then here we will return the to-do. And of course we have to put this inside curly brackets, just like that, so that there's no errors. Remove one spacing. And here we're going to have our props. And of course, we're just going to be passing in ... props. And of course, this is a lot cleaner than doing stuff like having the user to be equal to user and so on and so forth. But if we go back in here, there should be absolutely no errors. But now we can go ahead and copy and paste this. And this guy will be the incomplete. And it should be pretty much the same thing. But here, this will be false. And let's see if any of that works. So currently we're getting some sort of error. So objects are not valid as a React child. Okay, so let's go to our to-do right over here, and we will fix everything. So of course, this is the variables that we're getting now. So let's go ahead and fix that. And now we're going to have some sort of errors over here. So I'm just going to comment this out, is done. It's going to be the same. To do should also stay the same. And now we're still getting an error. It might have something to do with the actual text. So let's remove it and console log the props. So what I'm going to do is just write props in here for now. And let's console log them and see if we're actually getting them, or if there's some sort of error occurring. So is done is not defined, but we have our to do. We have our is done is false, set user, which is a function, to do, which is finish work with the ID. And that's why we're getting the error, because of the to do. So let's see, if we go back in here, the to do will have right over here, we're going to set this to do, which will be to do, and then the underscore ID, and see if that works. Or actually, we can just pass in the whole to do so that we have one variable instead of two. But now if we do this again and write to do, this should be fixed. Props not defined, of course. So we will comment this one out, and here's all of our text. If you don't want this to be to do, you can do something else like changing this to be to do, just like that, and then the actual ID, but we're not going to be doing that, so I'm just going to keep it like this. Or actually, another thing you can do is just rename this. So you can do something like if we go over here and write current to do and then set this to be current to do, and then same thing with right here, and then same thing over here. If we reload, we're still getting some sort of error. Now would be reading to do, add to do. So current to do dot to do, incomplete. Not exactly sure why we're getting the error, but everything is fixed now. So that's another way you can do that. But of course, this is all up to you. So if we're doing this here, might as well do the same thing over here, current to do. And now that we have that done or out of the way, one thing that I do want to do is add that feature. Or actually, before we do that, we have to make this work first. So the done to do. So first thing that we're going to do is actually just erase this and create our new list. So new list, and here we're going to have our incomplete. And so our incomplete will be set to user.todos.incomplete, incomplete.filter. And here we're going to filter out the current to do. So let's just write to do. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking if the to do dot underscore ID doesn't equal to current to do dot underscore ID. So what it's going to do is it's going to take a look at all of the incompletes inside of the user.todos, and if the ID matches to the current to do that we're passing in, then what's going to happen is it's just going to remove it. So the incomplete is going to be all of the to-dos without the to-do that we just removed, which means that we can set the complete ones, so complete, to be the previous user.todos.complete with the current to-do that we have. So just like that, we can close that. And right over here, we're going to actually just set user to be, of course, the previous user, and then we're going to set the to-dos to be the new list, and then of course we're going to send an API request, so axios.post, and this will go to API to-dos and then remove, which we haven't created yet, but we will. And then the to-dos, we're going to put that in round brackets, or sorry, curly brackets, will be new list.incomplete. So just like that. And of course, we're going to be getting an error because this has to be an async function for us to use await. And this should be it for the front end. But now we're going to go back to the to-dos, create a new folder called remove route.js file. As always, we're going to create a route.js file. And then in here, we're going to import everything again. So let's go to get, copy this, paste it right over here. Let's connect to the database, and then we're going to export const host function, async request. As always, we're going to have our try and catch method in case we get any errors, and then we're going to console log it, and then we're going to return a next response. Right over here, let's actually go back to the get, and then we're going to copy this because we're going to do the exact same thing, right? We're getting the user if it exists. If not, we're sending a user not found. But either way, now we can get our to-dos from await and then request.json, and then we're going to set user.todos to be simply just the to-dos, and then await user.save, and then we will have to return a next response.json. Here we're going to set the message to be to-do removed successfully with a status of 200, and let's also console.log the user.todos to see if that worked, so that we don't have to go to the MongoDB. But currently we have our finished work and then this gibberish and ABC. If we press on ABC, Axios not defined. So of course, very simple error to fix. Let's find Axios right over here. Let's import it and do this again. So ABC. And if we take a look here, we can actually see that we only have 2 to-dos in our incomplete, but at the very start we had 3, so that means that it actually did remove it from the database. But we can take a look in VS Code 2, and we have our first to do and our second to do, so instead of 3 that we originally had. Now if we go in here, we can remove that, and then what we are going to do is add that feature that I was talking about. So to do that, we're going to change this a bit. So if is not done, then we're going to do all of this. Let's move this inside. So there we go. I'm going to put it at the very top over here, and then we're going to write else. It means that it's done, so we're going to set is done to be false. And then we're going to have a new list again. It's pretty much just going to be flipped. So we're going to set our incomplete to be ... user.todos.incomplete. And then of course the current to do, but then the complete is going to be the exact same thing that we had in here. So let's go ahead and copy that, paste it in here, and we're going to change this guy to be complete instead of incomplete. And that should be it for the new list. But if we set the user to be previous user and then to do and a new list, and then we write await axios.post, and then we're going to go to API, or sorry, let's fix this, API, to-dos, and then add, and we can pass in the current to-do. And I'm not sure if that will work, but let's see if it does. So we have a finished one, and if we press on it again, we can see that it gets added back. So if we press on finished work, we have only one to do right over here. But if we press on that again, we can see that it's back. And we're doing all of that with the IDs, which means that if we had, let's just say 2 ABCs, I'm not sure what just happened with this guy. Let's reload. Yeah, it's gone. But if we have 2 ABCs now and I press on one of them, we can see that we're going to have only 1 ABC. But if we press on that again and go back in here, we should have 3 ABCs and of course 2 different IDs. If we reload, something happened over here. So let's take a look at the database and see if there's some sort of issue. So we're only going to be getting the ID and not the to-do. So of course now, since we're using the current to-do, we're going to have to set the to-do to be current to-do.to-do, and then the ID to be current to-do dot underscore ID, and that should work now. So let's reload, let's press on ABC, press on it again, reload, and everything should be working again. So let me add a few ones. Now if we press on some of them and then undo all of them and reload, we can see that everything still works perfectly well. And we can actually go back to the page.js file, remove the console log so that we don't have it. And now if we actually go ahead and delete all of them, or almost all of them, we can see that they disappear. So our new feature finally works. But now what we're going to do is actually add a button over here that when we press will just sign us out. And I'm going to actually demonstrate how this works. So we can see that this is 3001 and this is 3000. So this is the complete version. But if I create a user right over here, or already exists, so let's just log in. So there we go. This is what it's going to look like, or something similar to this, but we can see this button over here, and when we press on it, it's going to sign us out. So it's pretty simple, but it's a pretty nice feature that we can add. So of course, if we close the app, go to public, we can see this signout.svg, and that's where it's from. So what we're going to do is go back to the page.js file, and right over here, so somewhere in here, I'm not sure what's going on, but pretty sure this should look like that. But either way, we have our to-do content, and right where we have our h1, here we're going to create a div with a class of padding right of 4 and then margin bottom of 2, or sorry, margin top of 2. We're going to put the h1 in here, and we're also going to create an image element. So image, of course, we have to import it from Next.js. The source, so source will be signout.svg, and then let's fix a few things. So width will be 46. Same goes for height. Then we're going to have a class name of position relative, so just relative, float, and cursor will be pointer. So whenever you hover it, you're still getting this because we have to set the alt to be something. Yeah, so we're just going to set this to sign out, but cursor is going to be pointer. Then we're going to set the brightness to be 90, and then on hover we're going to set the brightness to be 100. And then one more thing, we're going to set this to be transition all, and we can set the brightness to be something lower, so maybe until we have 90 and then 75. So let's try 75, see what that would look like. So let's log in, see if we have an account. We do, so there it is. And whenever you hover it, the brightness changes a little, but the problem is that it's a lot less bright as this. So of course you can play around and set this to whatever you want, but I'm just going to set this to be 90, just like that. But now if we take a look at it, we can see that the to-do list is a little bit to the left. So if we remove the image, we can see it move back to the center. So there's a few things that of course we have to fix. So first thing that we're going to do is remove the margin top from the h1 because we don't need that anymore. And actually, let's also add the user.name since we can do that. And here, if we try to do this, we're going to get an error. So we're going to copy that, paste it in here, and now it should look like this. So I'm not sure why we do not have a name. So right over here we're getting an error, I think. So it's in the to-do list app API. That's to do with the token. So I'm guessing we don't have a token anymore, or we do, but it's not working anymore. So what we're going to have to do is, if it's not working anymore, then we're just going to have to delete it, and then it would log us out. But let's log in again and see if that works. So here is Web's to-do list. It's just a tiny feature that we do have a space. So I'm not sure why it's not added in here too. So if I do double space, now that works. but we can still see that it's a lot more to the left than it is to the right. So to fix that, what we're going to do is simply just add a padding left of 4, since we have the padding right of 4. Or actually, let's just set this to padding x of 4 and this to padding left of 4 and see how that looks. So there we go. Now we can see that this is centered. And of course, if sign out is not going to work right now, but if the text here was a lot longer, so if this wasn't just web, it was some random letters, it would look something like this. So of course you would have to add some sort of thing that would counter that. Let's go to the page and just set this to be my of 2, which will space things a little bit more. And I think we should be able to change the sizing here. So this is what the default will look like. So maybe we can set this to be a little bit larger. So text 3XL. Of course, this is not going to work in here. So we're going to go back in here, change this to 3XL. So there it is. And maybe, let's see, we have padding 1. Maybe if we set this to padding 2, so px of 2 and then py of 1, that would look much better. So there we go. And now let's actually work on the button, since nothing is happening whenever we click it. So we're going to go back in here. We have our image, and we don't really have to make a button. So let's just add an onClick over here. OnClick, we're going to run a callback function called handle sign out, and we're going to go ahead and create it. So let's move this use effect to the very top, so right over here. Then we have our get data, add note, and let's have our sign out right over here, const handle sign out, and this will be an async function, of course. So try catch error, and then we're just going to console log the error. And right over here, we're just going to wait axios.post, and then we're going to go to API, and of course, sign out. And then we're going to move the user to a different page or reroute. So we can actually remove the to-do list from here. And then we're going to import use router from Next navigation, and then const router, which will be use router. And right over here, we're going to run router.push, and we're going to push the user to log in. Or what we can do is just push the user to the home page. And since they're not going to have the cookies anymore, it's just going to go straight up to the middleware, and whatever you've set this URL to be, then that's where it's going to push it to. Then that's where it's going to push the user to. So this should be it. Now we're going to go to the API, and then we're going to create a folder called sign out, and then we're going to create our route.js file inside. And there's not going to be much stuff, so we can just import next response, and then of course export const post, which will be an async function. And we're going to be getting the request, and then we're going to run try and catch, get the error, console log the error, and then return next response.error. Else, we're just going to create a response variable, which would be next response.json with a message of user signed out successfully, status of 200, and then here we're going to write response.cookies.set be token. We're going to set that to blank, and then we're going to say HTTP only, set that to true, and then we're going to set max age to be 0. And also, if you had the expires, we can also do that. So expires, new date, we're going to set that to 0. And now this should hopefully work. Of course, we do have to return the response, and let's see if that works. So if we press on the sign out, we can see that we have been successfully signed out. But now there's one thing that we do also have to fix, and that is that if we're logged in and, for example, I don't know, something happened to the user and it was deleted, and we go back in here and reload, we can see that we're not getting any information, but for some reason we're still logged in, and that's because of the cookie. So we can see that it's still here, and in here we're saying that failed to load resource, the server responded with this and that, and that's because of the cookie and nothing is found. And it's quite simple to fix this. So right over here, if we don't have a user, it's going to return that. But before we do it, what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable, so const response, which will be equal to next response.json, and then response.cookies.set, and then we're going to set this to exactly what we set it to be inside of the sign out, so this, and then we will return response. And let's see if this works. So now if we reload, we're still going to get our error, but if we reload again, then it's going to sign us out. So to fix that, what we're going to do is we're going to go inside of here, and we're going to say if response.status equals 404, I'm pretty sure 404, then we will router.push and see if that works. So let's create a new user, web, sign up. We're going to go back in here, refresh, and then delete the user. and then refresh, we're getting all of our errors. Response is not defined. And that's because we have to use error inside of here because we're not getting the response. So error.status equals 404. And that should be it. So sign up, email address, password 123, refresh, delete the user. Of course, if we refresh now, we're going to get automatically redirected back to the login page. So that works. And so now it finally works. And of course, there's one more thing that we have to add, and that's the default notes so that users know how to use this. But it's in the signup route.js. And here where we have our to-dos, we're going to create a few templates. So the first one, we're just going to set the to-do to be number 1, and we're going to set this to create your first to-do. And let's also add an ID, so underscore ID, new mongoose.types.object ID, and we can actually just do it like that. And then we're going to have our second to-do, so number 2, press on me to complete, and of course we're going to have an ID. Then we have another to-do, and in here we can write when completed, I'll be removed when reloaded. That just means whenever the page is reloaded, then the to-do will be removed. And let's also create another one, so to-do, and then this guy will be number 4, and we can write if misclicked, click again, click me again to add back. So that's the new feature that we added. So if misclick, click me again to add back, and let's see if that worked. So of course, if we refresh, let's go ahead and delete this user and see if this works again. So reload, and there we go. We get redirected back to this page. Press sign up, name, email address, password 123, and we might be getting some sort of error. So let's open it. We do have an error, so it's right over here, and it just says that mongoose is not defined. So that's, again, very simple error. So import that, and now if we press on sign up, everything worked, and we have all of our to-dos. Create your first to-do, press on me to complete, and of course, if misclicked, click again to add me back. And so there we go. I did mess up the order, so let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, we can add our own, so let's just say finish homework, and then we can say number 1 because we can delete these ones, so delete this, and if we reload, we're going to have finished homework. And of course, one thing that we can also do is whenever we write a new to-do, so if we write something random, we can have a few options maybe on the side, so have it numbered or any of that kind of stuff. But again, this is just a very basic template of this, so I would like you to add your own features and play around and just learn how to use backend and frontend together to develop your skills. And now there's one more thing that's left to do, and that would be to add a loading animation. So if you reload, we can see that there's nothing and then everything shows up. And inside of the CSS, we already have this loading animation, but if you want to go ahead and add a different one, I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. But what I'm going to do is go back in here to our page.js file, and right over here, or actually before we go there, we have to create a use state. So const, and then we're going to have loading, and then set loading, and that will be set to false. Let's fix this, and then we're going to go right over here, and then we're just going to cut this out, and in here we're going to say loading. If loading is true, then we're going to load a component that we haven't created yet, but loader, or else we're going to paste all of this, or actually we have to paste it inside of our empty tag over here. And now we shouldn't have any errors. So let's space everything out just like that. And actually, I'm going to put this one down so it looks like this. And let's space everything out. So, and what I'm going to do is actually just do this, go back in here, and everything looks pretty well. But now let's go to our components. So let's close the API, components, loader.js, and then we're going to run rafce, and then we're going to go to the index.js file, import loader, and then we will also add the loader in here. And since we already have the CSS for a Pacman loader, we're just going to write it down in here. So this one is pretty long, but it's going to be loading GIO, spinner, and then bean, eater, and then if we go to the CSS class, scroll to the very bottom, we can find this class right here, and we're just going to copy that, go to the loader, and then we can paste it in here, tailing classes, so mx of auto, and then item center. And here we're going to create another div with a class name of this right here. We're going to paste it, and here we're going to have a bunch of divs. So we're going to have a div with a div inside, and then outside of that we're going to have another div, and then in this div we're going to have 1, 2, and then 3 divs, and this should be it. So if we go in here and then to do and then we can also import the loader. Let's see if it works. So if no loading, then it's going to show it. So there it is. All that we're going to have to do now is add a few more classes in here that will depend on the loader. So after rounded, actually we're going to have to cut this out and then paste it again like this. And then here we're going to write loading. Then we're going to add a class of items center, else it's going to be blank. And I'm going to fix this real quick. So there we go. And if we reload, let's inspect everything and see if we missed anything. So we can see that this still doesn't work. And that's because we have to go back in here and then set this to true. So that's a small mistake, but there we go. So now it's in the middle, and whenever it's loading, we're going to have this nice little cool Pac-Man loading animation. And then whenever we get our data, so here we're going to write set loading false. And when we reload, whenever we get all of our data, we can see that it shows up. But before that, we have this Pac-Man loading animation. But if you wanted to add your own, so for example, there's this one right here. All you have to do is copy the HTML, go to the loader. So let's scroll down, loader. I'm just going to comment this out, paste this in here, and then we're going to copy the CSS. And this website actually has a lot better HTML and CSS than the one that I used to find that loader, but it's totally fine. So we can paste that in here. And then if we reload this one, we can see that it's going to be right in there, which just means that we're just going to have to fix the styling a little bit. But here we're going to fix class name, and then let's copy this class, paste it in here, and now it's going to be in the middle. And of course, you can go back in here and then change the colors or anything else. So we can set this to be blue, and then we can set the width and height to be something larger, so maybe 64 pixels. Copy and paste that in here, reload, and now it's going to be much larger. We can also change the border, so maybe 10 pixels, and see what that would look like. So there it is. And so I think what I'm going to do is actually keep this loading animation, since it's a lot cleaner than this one, as we can see. So what I'm going to do is actually just delete it. So from keyframes, so I'm going to select this, go all the way down to here, and just go ahead and delete it. And actually this right here was where I got the loading animation from. So you can go ahead and click it, and also check out this website. So there's a bunch of different ones, of course. And here is the Pac-Man one. You can change colors, palettes, and that kind of stuff. But as we can see, the code on this one is much cleaner. So let's remove that, go back, and then reload, and there it is. In this video, you're going to be creating a Chrome extension version of our to-do list, and it works with the actual web version of our to-do list. So right over here, I can log into bob@gmail.com, and we can see that the to-dos and everything else matches. So if I do actually add a to-do, so for example, finish recording this video, and I refresh this to do, we can see that finish recording this video pops up in here. And of course, if I remove this to do, I open the to-do list, we can see that now it's not in here anymore. But of course, you can always undo it. And then if I open it again, we can see that it pops back in. And we do have a few features. So if you do want to open the full web version really fast, you can actually just press on this button right here, and it's going to open it. And of course, you can also sign up if you do want to. So let's create an account real quick. Password is going to be 123. Here's going to be our to-do list, but we can go in here and log in with the same account. So 123. And if I do add a bunch of to-dos here and open the Chrome extension version and scroll down, we can see that all of them are here. But before we actually start this video, make sure that you watch all of it, because there's a bunch of different things that can go wrong and small stuff that you have to add so that you don't get any errors. And I did forget to mention that I do have a GitHub repository for the Next to-do list version 2. This one is going to have a few little improvements, and it's also going to have the final API folder for our Chrome extension API endpoint. So if I go to API, there's one for extensions with different API points that only the extension should be using. But if you do get any errors, then of course you can check this one out. But now that we have that out of the way, you can go ahead and open this website, which is going to be linked down in the description below. And this is going to tell you how you can create a Chrome extension using Vite, and we are going to follow this. So we can copy this line right over here, and you're going to want to go to your desktop, right click, press on open in terminal. Here we're going to paste this, and we're going to remove the TS because that's a template for React TypeScript. But if we leave it like this, then it's going to be for React. And actually, I'm going to stop this because we're going to change this to be to-do list extension, and then we are going to press on enter. We're going to choose React right over here, and we're going to choose JavaScript. Now we're going to cd to do list extension. We're going to run npm install, and while everything is installing, we are going to copy this line. So npm install Vite plugin static copy, and after it's done, installing all of those dependencies, we're going to install the one that we just copied. So I'm going to paste it, wait for this to install, and now we can open this in VS Code. And now we are going to have to add a few more things. So the first thing is going to be to create a manifest.json file inside of our public folder. So in here we can write manifest.json, and you can copy this right here and set this to whatever you want, but I recommend opening the to-do list extension repository, which also is going to be linked down in the details below. But right over here, we're going to go to public, and then we can press on the manifest.json file, and we're going to copy all of this, paste it in here. And of course, you're free to change some of the stuff. So the name, you can change this just to-do list or whatever you want. I'm going to change this to to-do list extension, and then description, you're free to change that too. And right over here, we can see we have this background file, which we haven't created yet. So let's go ahead and do that. To create it, we're going to go inside of the public folder and write background.js. And for now, we're going to keep it blank. Let's go back to the repository, and right over here, we are going to open the URL SVG, download this, and then we're also going to download the signout.svg. So make sure you do that, and then you can drag and drop both of them inside of the public folder. So let's do the same with the URL. So here we have the signout and URL, which we're going to be using later on in the video, of course. And before we try to install Tailwind, let's go ahead and run npm run build to see if this works. So let's wait for this to finish. And now we're going to open our extensions. So you can go here, go to extensions, manage extensions, make sure developer mode is turned on. Find your to-do list extension, open the dist folder, select it. Could not load favicon.png. So that's another thing that we also do have to download. So let's go inside of the public folder, favicon.png, download that. And then I'm going to drag and drop it inside of the public folder. So public, let's run this again, make sure that everything works. Let's retry. And here is going to be our extension. So if we open it now, we can see that we have our default Vite template. And now to install Tailwind, we can actually close this. We're going to run npm install Tailwind CSS at Tailwind CSS Vite. And while that's installing, we can open the vite.config.js file. And right over here, we are going to import Tailwind CSS from Tailwind CSS Vite, and we're going to add it in here. And also we do have to copy the CSS file. So let's open this again. We are going to go to the source folder. Right over here, we have the index.css. Let's copy all of this, paste it in here. And of course, we can remove the app.css file, go to the app.jsx file, remove that. And just to make sure that everything works, let's remove this real quick. Create an h1. I'm just going to say hello world. And here we're going to have a class name of text3xl. And then let's also add a font bold and underline just to make sure that everything works. And here we can run npm run build, or instead of build, let's just run npm run dev, which also works. But we are going to be getting some sort of error, failed to load config. And we're going to be getting an error because for some reason this changed from what it was. So again, I'm going to do this, and this is probably my auto suggester. So npm run dev. Now this should be working. So there it is. And if we run it, we can see that our text is underlined, which means that Tailwind CSS works. So of course, what I'm going to do is go back to the app.jsx and change it back to what it was. There we go. And before we actually try running this as a Chrome extension, let's go to our index.css and comment out the background image, just because it's going to look a little bit weird for a bit, but we can go back in here, and all that we're going to do is actually remove the boilerplate code. We're going to create a very basic div with a class name of do container, and then flex call, height of screen. And then here, let's create an h1 with a class name of text3xl and also font medium. And this is just to see that everything works. So to-do list, let's go back in here. Here's our to-do list, but for some reason, zoom in. For some reason, the styles that we have aren't applied, and that's in the to-do's container. So let's fix this, to-do's container. And so there it is. Let's also remove these imports because we're not going to be using them. And also this use state, which we're not going to be using for now. But what we're going to do is open another terminal. So press on this button right over here, and we're going to run npm run build, which is going to create a build folder for us. So right over here. And now what we can do with that build folder is we can press on the three buttons at the very top here, go to extensions, manage extensions, make sure you have your developer mode enabled. And here we have our clicker Chrome extension that we made with plain React, but we're not going to need that right now. And you're going to want to press on load unpack, find the path to your to-do list extension, which in my case is just going to be on my desktop. And then we're going to go inside of the dist folder and press on select folder. And here is going to be our to-do list extension with a pretty nice logo over here. Now you're going to want to navigate to the extensions over here, and we're going to pin our extension. And if we open it, we can see our to-do list, and obviously we're not going to have anything else, but we did this just to test out that our Chrome extension actually works. But now I wanted to show you something. So if we go to Vercel and I log in, so right over here, we can see our next to-do list, which I actually actually uploaded to the web so anyone can open it, and I log in, 1, 2, 3. This might not work because we changed, so this is not going to work. So to fix that, I'm going to copy this MongoDB URL, go back in here, go to settings, go to environment variables, and then update to my MongoDB URL, edit, paste that in there, and everything should be working now. So if I log in, this might take some time. And now, of course, I have to redeploy everything. So I'm going to wait until this is done and show you what I wanted to fix. And so there it is. It's ready. So I'm going to open this again. Let's try to log in and let's see. So there we go. Everything works. I'm going to close my developer console. But if I add a note and press on enter, we can see that it does take some time to actually show it. So there we go. We can see that there was like a 1 to maybe 3 second delay. And the reason that this happens is because if we go inside of our code here, so app, and then let's go to our page.js, right over here where we add our to do, instead of adding it inside of the use state, what we're doing is we're adding it to the database and we're fetching all of the data from the database, which takes some time, of course. But the only reason that we're fetching it is because if we go inside of our API and then we go to our to-dos, add route.js, right over here we're creating a new ID, and for some reason I didn't want to create it inside of the page.js file, which we can also do, but this will make everything much faster. So we're going to go ahead and actually fix that real quick by going to the add to do function that we have over here. So right over here we're going to create a new to do variable, so new to do, and then here we're going to have our to do, of course, which is going to be the to do input, and then the ID, so underscore ID, it's going to be new mongoose, which we have to import, dot types, and then object ID. Let's make sure that we did import it. So there it is. Let's go back down in here, and then here we're going to pass in our new to do, and then we're setting our to do input to blank. And after we're doing all of that, let's set our user. So we're going to go in here and set our user to be the previous user. And then for to-dos, we're going to set all of our complete to-dos to be complete to-dos, so user.to-dos. But for the incomplete to-dos, we're going to set that to be ... user.to-dos.incomplete with our new to-do. So hopefully this makes sense, but of course we can make it a little bit nicer. So let's do that. But now we can go to the to-dos add instead of the API folders. So to-dos add route.js file. And then here we do have to fix one thing, and that would be right over here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change this to new to do, or let's go back here and see what we're passing in. So we're just passing in the new to do. So new to do, we can remove all of this, and hopefully this should be working now. So let's go back in here, reload everything, see if we get any errors. So if I add a new to do, press on enter, we have absolutely no errors, and that's because of course we're using the one that we are hosting. So I'm going to go back to here. Now if we remove and add it back, if we reload, there is our error, so cannot read properties of null, reading to do. And to fix that, what we can do is just remove all of this and write need to do equal to current to do, and we're going to write the same thing over here. Actually, this is removed, so we're not going to touch that for now, but we should refresh our database, and then here's our nulls, so we're going to go ahead and delete them, update, go back in here, refresh, let's add our to do, and let's remove it, reload, and now we get no errors. And after taking a look at the code, I've made a pretty small mistake because this should just be to do and then underscore ID, and then we're going to be saving our to do and then of course the underscore ID. So now let's see if this will work. I'm going to refresh everything, add a note, refresh, still here. Let's reload. Now it's gone, but if we add a note, press on it again and refresh, now it's going to be empty. So now that means that there's something wrong in here. So let's go to our to do. Now would most likely be something right over here. You can see that the new to do is going to be current to do, but we should be passing just the current to do. So what I'm going to do is just hold Control Z, which will bring everything back to what it was. And let's see if this will work. So let's go back to the database. I'm gonna refresh actually before editing it. Let's open our to-dos. Here's gonna be the blank one. So I'm gonna delete it, update, go back in here, refresh. Let's add our to-do, press on it to complete, and then press on it again to incomplete, refresh, and everything works. So now we have fixed two problems, and there's one more, which would be the reloading. So we can see that it does reload, but then it kind of everything loads in after around a second. So if you take a close look, when you reload, we don't see the name and there's no to-dos, and then it just pops up. And that's a very simple fix also. And that's also a very simple fix by going to by going to the page.js. So what I'm going to do is actually close everything and find the page.js file. We're going to cut this out of the use effect. We're going to open get data, and we're going to paste it right over here. So now when we reload, it's going to take a little bit longer, but everything loads at the same time, which makes everything a lot better, which fixes all of our small issues for now. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually work on our Chrome extension. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually, of course, add the code, and then we're going to have to set up our login and sign up, and then all the different APIs to get our to-dos and all of that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and open our to-do list extension. And the first thing that we're going to do is go to our source directory, because again, this is not a Next.js project. This is just plain React with Vite. So we're going to have our source directory, and then in here, we're going to create a folder called sections. And of course, as always, you're free to do this however you want, but I'm just going to try to keep it as neat as possible. And here we're going to create our index.js file. And then we're also going to create the to-do list section, so .jsx, and then also our login and sign up. But just for now, let's do our to-do list, and we're going to make everything else work in just a bit. But in here, const to-do list, and then as always, export to default to-do list. Let's return what we have in the app.jsx. So copy this, paste this right over here. Go to our index.js. We're going to import to-do list. And then we're also going to export to-do list with all of the different JSX files that we're going to have in here. But now we're going to go to the app.jsx. Here we're going to import to-do list from sections. And we are going to paste it right in here, to-do list, and let's see how all of this looks. So go back in here, refresh, and of course nothing is going to change because we just copied and pasted our code. Let's go back to our extension, go to to-do list, and actually write some code. We're going to change this to medium, and this is going to stay as to-do list. And here we're going to create another div, which is going to be to-dos margin top, or sorry, just margin top of 1, px of 2, padding bottom of 1.5, grid. We're going to set the gap to be 0.5, and then we're going to set overflow to be auto, which is going to show us a scroll bar whenever we have too many to-dos. And then in here, we are going to have our to-do. So let's go ahead and create a component for that right over here, const to-do. And then here we are going to return a div with a class name of to-do, width of full, text is going to be start, py is going to be set to px, px is going to be 1.5, rounded, and on hover, we're going to set the cursor to be pointer, and then we're going to set the text to be extra large, and then we're going to have a span in here with the text. So I'm just going to write to do in here just to see what that would look like, and then let's add our to do and see how that would look like. So we do have to add a background. Let's do that real quick. So let's add a background of sky 900, and here's our to do. For now, we're just going to create a very basic template, which we're still going to work on later, but I just want to show you how this stuff kind of works because it's a little bit different since it's a lot smaller when it comes to Chrome extension sizing. But this is pretty much it for like the very basic HTML stuff. So we can create a bunch of to-dos, go back in here, and this is what it would look like. Now, of course, we do have to create our input, so let's go ahead and do that right now. So under this div, we're going to create another div with a class name. So div class name of inputs with the full and margin top of auto. And here we're going to create our input. So input, we're going to create a placeholder right over here, which is just going to say add to do. Then we're going to have our type. Here we're going to have our class name with the full outline. We're going to set that to be none. Py is going to be 1, px 2. Background will be slate 800. We're going to add coloring to the placeholder. So placeholder is going to be text slate 400. And then the actual text will be slate 100. And the sizing will just be extra large. Then we're going to set the value to be input, which we haven't created yet. This will be a hook, and then on change we're just going to set input to be e.target.value. So let's go ahead and create our hook. So const input, set input, and then that's going to be a blank use state. And yeah, so let's see how that looks like. So there it is. And of course, if we go to our CSS, index.css, uncomment the background, this is what it would look like. So we can see that it does look pretty nice, and we can actually add a hovering effect here if we wanted to. So we can go to the to-do list, to do, and then on hover we can set the background to be sky 950, and maybe set this to 800. So there it is. Let's set this to just 900. That looks a bit nicer. And of course, we're going to make this functional in just a bit. This is going to be our to-do list. And actually, let's go ahead and not sure what I just did here. So I'm going to close that. Let's run npm run build. to see what this would look like. So now that it's done, let's go to our extensions, update, and here is our to-do. Of course, if you wanted to, you can change the sizing a little bit. Everything here is up to you, but we are going to be changing this a little bit when we do actually get to work on it. And actually, let's go ahead and create another folder called components. And here we're going to create another index.js file and also our to-do.jsx file. And here I'm going to copy this, or actually I'm just going to cut this out, go in here, paste it, and then export default to-do, import to-do. I'm not sure why it's not showing it, but import to-do, and we're going to export to-do just like that. Can go back to our to-do list and then import to-do. Let's fix this and let's see if everything still works. So there's our to-do, and of course we can remove all of our to-dos that we had in here just so that we have one for now. And this shouldn't be in here, so to fix that we're just going to set this to margin top, and now it's going to be at the very bottom. So there it is. But now let's move on to actually logging in and signing up so that we can get our data and we can actually add stuff to our to-do list, remove it, and all of the above. We're going to go to our app.jsx, and in here let's create a use state called section, and then of course we're going to have our section, not import, but const section, set section, and then the first one will be login, which we haven't created yet, but we will. And then in here, let's fix everything. We're going to say section equals to login, then we will have our login, then if it was to do, then we're going to show the to-do list. And now let's create our login section, .jsx. Here I'm just going to run this to see if this works, but of course we're going to change this in just a second. Let's go to the index.js, import login, and then right over here, login to-do list, and then we're also gonna have the sign up, but we don't have that yet. So login, just make sure that all of this actually works. Set section, and now if we go in here, there is our login, so that works. For the section, what we're going to do is go back to GitHub, and if I search up sign up, there's our Next.js sign up login template, and of course all the links to these GitHub repositories are going to be down in the details below, so you can go find them and open them real fast. But we're going to go to the app, and then we're going to go to login page.js, and let's go ahead and copy all of this, or actually let's just copy the whole file, find the login, paste everything in here. We're not going to be using router, so we can remove that. I'm going to comment this line out, and also everything that has to do with our API, we're going to comment this out also. We're going to remove the image. Let's see if we still have any errors. Failed to Axios. So that's something that we do also have to install. npm install Axios, and that should be all of our errors. So let's refresh, and so there it is. So of course this looks very wrong, but of course we're going to fix all of that. So let's scroll down, and we don't actually need any of this stuff, so we can go back in here, and I'm honestly just going to copy all of this. So copy that and then paste it instead of what we have right here. And we're going to move all of these classes, and we're also going to set or change this from padding 8 to padding 4. Then we're going to have our div, which is not going to have an image anymore, just like that. Let's see what that looks like now. So there it is. It looks a lot smaller. Now we're actually going to put them side by side, which is going to make this a lot easier. So let's close that. I'm going to move this in here. Let's zoom in, but I'm pretty sure we should be able to just move the H2 in here. Yeah, we can do that. That's one div out of the way. Here we're going to change margin top of 5 to 2. And for the label, we're going to change this to large instead of XL. And for the H2, we're going to set this also just to XL. And we're also going to set this to just login, that we don't have too much text. And we're also going to remove the margin top since it's not needed anymore. Now back to our label over here, we can scroll down to our email and change the text from XL to large. And so now that we've changed this to large, we can scroll down a little bit more. We can actually delete this div over here and then change this to large, and we can remove the margin top 2 in this div because we don't need too much spacing again, and I also forgot to remove it from here. So let's go ahead and do that. For the password, we're going to change this to large, and then same goes with our button. So right here we're going to change this to large, and then again right over here we're going to change this from medium to small, so pretty much just downsizing everything. And we are not going to have a URL here anymore. We're going to change our section, so we can remove the href, and then all that we're going to do here is add a cursor of pointer. And again, it's not doing anything, but we do get a cursor of pointer. So what I'm going to do is run npm run build just to see what this looks like, to make sure that I haven't missed anything. And let's go in here, update everything, open it, and here's going to be our login page. So to me, it looks pretty good. And again, if you want to change something, so for example, I can make this larger. If I went in here, you can change the padding, of course. So you can set the padding, be 1 rem if you wanted to, right? You can make it smaller, maybe 0.5, right? This is all up to you, but I'm going to keep it like this. But actually, I might change the padding top. So I'm going to open this, close that, go to the very top where we have our login. I'm going to set the padding top to be 2. Should make it much smaller. Let's see if that changed anything. Yeah, so margin top is a little bit smaller now. But now let's actually go ahead and try to log in to our user by sending an Axios request to our actual page. But before we do that, I do have to mention that if we take a look at our localhost in here, if I scroll down, I'm gonna actually just restart everything. So npm run dev, we can see that it's running on port 5173. But if I go back to, where is it at? Next to-do list. Yeah, next to-do list, and I open it, this is running on localhost 3000. Let's run this again. So localhost 3000, which means that we are going to get a CORS error, and you're going to see what I mean by that in just a second. And for our extension, we're going to make a folder here called extension inside of our APIs, because it's going to be just a little bit different from all of our APIs here. And you'll see what I mean by that in a second. But let's create our login and then route.js. While we're at it, let's also create another path just to the to-dos, which is going to be blank for now. But instead of the login.js, we are going to go and copy this, paste it in here, and we are going to comment this part out for now. And we're going to send in this response. User logged in successfully, of course, and we actually will comment everything out just so we don't get any other errors, but we want to see if we're actually getting anything in here. So if we go back to our extension, so let me open it, to-do list extension. Let's close this. If I try to run await axios.post, and then this will go to extension login, and then we're going to be passing in the user, we are going to be getting an error. So let's try this. Web dev with Ron, 1, 2, 3. There it is. Pretty sure we're just getting a not found, and that's because of the URL. So again, this is just a small mistake I made. This should go to HTTP and then localhost 3000, and then it's going to go to API extension and login. So let's try again, or let's reload, try again, and there it is. So we're getting access to this URL from origin, has been blocked by CORS policy. Response to pre-flight request doesn't pass access control. But pretty much all that it says is that our Next.js project right here is not allowing any other URLs to send API requests just because it's a different URL, and if we're not allowing it, it shouldn't be allowed. But it's a pretty simple fix. So if you go down in the description below, you're going to want to open this page, and we're going to scroll down, make sure that we don't miss it. It's going to be right over here. So using headers config, and to fix everything, we're just going to have to open our Next.js. So again, let's find it. This is next to-do list. So let's close the app folder. We're going to go to the next.config.js, which in this case is going to be next.config.mjs. We're going to open this, and then we are going to copy this async function, paste it in here, and here's where you can match all of the API routes that we're allowed to use. So here we're going to set this to API and then extension, and then we're going to have our path, and then get delete. This is going to be all the different methods that we're allowed to use, but let's just see if we get any errors when we try to do it now. So 1, 2, 3, we're still getting our error. So let's try to rerun the server, npm run dev. Same goes with the extension. I'm just going to find it. So there it is. Let's restart everything. Going to rerun this, npm run dev, and hopefully again, everything should be working. So what I'm going to do is open this, see if we get any console logs, but we're going to try to log in. 1, 2, 3, press on login, and nothing is happening for some reason. But if we go in here into the next to-do list, we can see that we are getting a post from API extension, which means that everything should be working. And of course, I'm not console logging anything, so it's not going to show anything. So let's try this again. Web dev 1, 2, 3, and here's our data. So user logged in successfully, even though of course nothing is happening. So now that we have the CORS policy out of the way, let's try to actually log in. So we're gonna be passing in the user, and this user is gonna have an email and a password. So let's go and open our next to-do list. We can close this. And we're going to start by getting our email and password. And here we're going to be checking if we have a user with the email in the database. If we don't have a user, we're going to send in a next response that says user does not exist with a status of 400. And that will actually activate the error message that we have in the form. Then we have our valid password. which is going to use bcrypt to compare the password that we are getting from the form with the hash password from the user. If the password is not valid, then we are going to send another message, which is going to say invalid password, which is also going to show in the form. And then right over here, we're going to be creating a token, which is going to be a cookie. And the way that it works in the Next.js file is if we have a token, then we're going to be able to access the to-do list, but if we don't, then it's not going to allow us to do that. But since the Chrome extension that we're making is not a Next.js Chrome extension, we can't have a middleware file. So the way that we're going to do this is we're still going to have a response, which is going to say user logged in successfully. But instead of actually putting a cookie in here, so response.cookies.set, we're not going to be setting in a cookie. Here we're going to be returning the response. Here we are going to be passing in the token data. So token data, just like that. And then inside of our Chrome extension, we are going to be setting a cookie inside of the Chrome extension to be the token data. And that's how it's going to work. Hopefully that made sense, but we are going to remove this from there. And let's see if this worked. So let's go back to our Chrome extension if I find it. So there it is. Here, let's console.log the response.token data. Let's see if that worked. So let's reload. 1, 2, 3. We're going to be getting undefined. What if I just do that? Data, token data. Maybe I misspelled it. Or no, this should have been response.data.token data. Or actually, another thing we can do is we can set this to be data. And then this will just be data.token data. So let's try again. And this is going to be the token that we're going to be setting. So now that we have our token data, we're going to need to actually set the token to the token data, of course. And to do that, we are going to be creating another folder, which is going to be called helpers. So let's go ahead and do that. Helpers. Here we're going to create a file called setToken.js, and we're also going to have an index.js file. But in the setToken, this is going to be plain JavaScript. And the only reason we're not running this function in the login.jsx is because we're going to be using it in the signup, so we're not going to have to write it twice. You can just create a separate file for that, but this is going to be a function called setToken, of course. Here we're going to be getting the CNAME. And also I got this from W3 Schools. So let me actually just show you real quick. If I search up JS cookies, you can go to JavaScript. You can go in here, scroll down, scroll a little bit more down, set this to dark theme. But right over here, there is check cookie, get cookie, and also set cookie. So let's actually just go ahead and copy this so that we don't waste too much time. But then here we're going to write export default set cookie. And then we're going to go to the index.js, import set cookie, or sorry, set token. You can also change the name to set cookie, but it doesn't really matter. Then we're going to export set token. We're going to go back in here, set token. And I just realized we have this use client, which we don't need because it's not a Next.js project. And we are going to be getting an error now. So the path is incorrect. We are going to be going out by another one, and then we're going to be going to helpers, and that should be it. But here, let's have an if statement. So if data.token data, then here we're going to set token to be token. So the 3 parameters that we have is the name, which is going to be token, and then response dot, or sorry, this is going to be again the data.token data. This is what we want to set it, and here is going to be the time. So in this case, it's going to be days, so X days, and you can set that to be 30 days, so a month or really whatever you want. And then we're going to have else. Here we're going to set an error message, which is going to say error saving cookie. And then here we're also going to be setting some other stuff. So actually, before we do the other stuff, let's just run this to make sure that this works. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to application, make sure there's no cookies, which I do have one, but I can remove it, of course. And if I try to log in, we can see our cookie appear. So everything works. And if it doesn't work for you, then make sure that you go back and check if you made any mistakes. But now we're going to go back to the app.jsx, and we are going to pass in the set section in here. Actually, we can create a variable called props. So const props. And here we're going to have set section. And we're also going to have one for loading, but we're just going to set this to that for now. We can pass in the props. And then if we go back to login, we can get our props, or sorry, set section, and then we are going to go in here, and then we're going to set section to be to do, just like that. And now if we remove that, and let's use the web dev with Ron email, 1, 2, 3, log in. We're going to go straight to our to-do list. But now the funny thing is, if we reload, we're going to go back to the login, and that's because we're not checking if we have a token. But that's also something that we're going to have to implement. But we're going to go back to our app.jsx, and I do want to create an is loading. So let's actually go ahead and do that right now, and then we can work on the sign up. So in here, we are going to create a function. I'm going to call this auth, as in like authenticate, but this is more like a get function. So it's like get data function. Here we're going to have our try and catch method because we are going to be using Axios. So import Axios. Here we're going to console log the error. There we go. And then in here, we're going to be checking if we have a token at first. So for that, we are going to make another file here. So I'm going to leave it just like this. Or actually, we can write the if statement. So this one is going to be get token. Then we're going to do some stuff else. We are going to return, but let's go in here and write get token.js. And this one's going to be pretty simple. So we can go back to the JavaScript cookie. We're going to copy this. But we are going to change most of this just to make it a lot simpler. So we can actually go ahead and remove all of this. We're going to remove the name. And in here, we're going to create a variable called token. That will be string ca dot replace. Here we're going to be replacing token equals to with blank. And then we're going to be returning the token, and then here we're returning this. So if token doesn't equal to nothing, then we're going to be sending the token, else it's going to be null. And I'm going to go ahead and actually console.log the CA just so that you see why we're replacing this. But if we go back to our, let's close everything that we don't actually need. Let's go back to the app.jsx, or actually we have to import it in here. So import get token, go back to app.jsx, import get token, see if this path actually works, and it does. And then here, actually we're not going to do anything here for now. So let's just console.log token, and then let's also run a use effect. So use effect, whenever we load in, we are going to authenticate. So let's see if all of our stuff that we just did actually works. So refresh, we're getting an error, does not provide an export named default. So let's see if we can fix that. Get token, export default, change this to get token. There we go. And change this to an arrow function just because they look a lot better. So there it is, index get token. So now everything should be working, and it does. But here is our CA. So if I go back in here, our CA is going to be the first thing that we print, and here we're getting token equals to the actual value, and that's the reason why we are replacing token equals with nothing, which is why we're just getting the actual value without the token equals to all of that stuff. So now let's remove the console log, go back to the app, and we're going to change this back to an if statement. So if get token, and also let's go back in here. Forgot to change one little thing, and that would be we don't actually need to set anything in here because we're already saying that we want to replace token equals to with blank. And now we're going to go to the login.jsx, and we're just going to copy this, paste it in here, and we're going to change this to do, and then get, and then here we're going to be sending in the token, which would be set to get token, and it's right over here where we are importing it. And of course, let's console.log the data, but now we are going to have to go back to our next to-do list. And instead of the extension, we have our to-dos folder. Here we're going to create another folder called get, and then instead of our get folder, we're going to have our route.js file, which for now we can copy this, paste everything in here. We're just going to check if any of our stuff here works. So let's return this next response, which is gonna say user fetched successfully, no token data. And let's refresh. We are getting an error, and I think I know why we're getting this error, and that's because of the to-dos. So I wrote extension to do get, but this is going to be to-dos. We're going to refresh everything, and there's our message, user fetched successfully. So this works, but now that we're setting the token, we are going to find to-dos, get, and then let's copy all of this, go back to our to-dos instead of the extension, paste that in here, remove this return, and of course we're going to be getting in our token, which will be await request.json. We're going to be passing the token instead of the request, and then we are only going to be getting the name and the to-dos. Actually, you don't really need the name because we're not going to be using it, but might as well also get the name. Then we're checking if we have a user, so response, and then we're also setting the cookies, which we don't need to do in this case, which means that we can return this. So if no user, return next response, user not found. Also, we're just going to be returning our user. So now if we reload, and weight, we are going to be getting in there. So if we take a look here, it says input must be 24 characters. If we scroll maybe up more, await user.find. Yeah, so it probably has something to do with get token data. So what I'm going to do is comment this out. Or actually, before we do that, let's open it. I'm going to actually remove it. We are going to copy this, and I think I know why we have the error now. So we're going to paste this in here. And since we already have the token, we don't need to be getting it. And that's the main reason why we had our error. Here we are going to be getting in our token, and that should be it. So let's refresh. And here is our to-dos fetched successfully with our user. So there it is. We have our ID, our to-dos, and then our name. So the main reason we had the error is because if we go to helpers, here we are going to be trying to get a cookie, which we don't actually have in our request. I'm going to rerun the server because I don't like errors, so clear. But now that we have our user here, we can go back to our extension, and here we are going to write if no data.user, then we are going to return else. We're going to set the section to be to do, and let's also create a few more hooks. So const, we are going to have user, which I'm going to put above, and then of course set user, use state with an email and password, and also we are going to have a URL. So URL, and this is going to be the domain of the page. So HTTP localhost 3000. And the only reason we're doing this is because if you actually upload it, you're not going to want to change all the URLs. So what we can do is just create a user with the whole URL, and then we're just going to set all of this stuff to be that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. And then here, where's the money sign? Here I'm going to write user.url. And then we are going to be going to API and then all of that other stuff. And then I'm going to paste this in here. Let's see if this still works. So let's refresh everything. And we're not going to be getting the console log because we're not asking for it, but we can see that we are in the to-dos. So that means that it worked, which means we can do the same inside of the login. So we have to go back to the extension, go to login. And here we are going to be getting our user. So section and then user, gonna write it in here, user.url, and then we're gonna be going to this API, cut this out, paste this in here. And of course, this user doesn't have any of this stuff. So let's add the URL. And then of course, we can go in here, go to the props, which is right over here. And then we can pass in the user, and we can actually comment this out. And everything should be working if we don't have our token. So let's remove it, refresh, set user is not defined. So we also have to add that in there, which I'm not going to do. So we can go back to this, and we're not going to pass in the user in the props. We're just going to copy this, paste it in here. So make sure you don't forget to add this in here, URL, unless if you want to, you can actually pass it in. So user, and then we can do set user and then also user, which means that set user and then we can comment this out. Now it's showing errors because it's missing prob validation. But if we go back in here, reload, we can see that all of the inputs work. And then if I do try to log in, it works. So there it is. And I do also want to add a loading, so we can see that whenever we refresh, it goes to login and then it switches to the to-do list. So the way to fix that is by adding a loading hook. So we don't actually need the user here anymore, so we can go ahead and remove it. And so in the app here, we can create our loading and then also set loading. And at the very bottom over here, we are going to say loading. If that's true, then let's just run h1 that says loading for now. Else, we are going to run our sections. Put that in here. There we go. And then in here, we can also set loading to be false. And this, we have to change that to true. So false, true. And then here, we forgot to actually set the user to be data.user, and then we are still going to keep the URL, so user.url. So set user, then we're going to change the section, and then only then we're going to set loading to be false. And we do have to make a component for loading because it's going to look pretty bad, so we can see it doesn't look as good as it should, but we're going to fix that in just a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our next to-do list. Here we're going to find our loader inside of the components. We're going to copy it, and then in the extension, we're going to go to components, create a loader.jsx, paste this in here. We're going to remove all of that HTML. We're going to remove all of the commented code, and this is pretty much just going to be it for the loader. So if you don't want to create a whole component for that, you can just copy the span with the classes and paste it in there. But here we are going to run the loader. And then we also do have to import it. So import loader, and then right over here, loader from components. So components, fix all of that. And let's set this to not loading, but here's going to be our loader, and it's not going to be centered or anything. So what I'm going to do is go back in here, and we're going to put this inside of a div, just like this, with the class name of to-dos container, flex, and then items center. And then we can move the item center from the span. And this is what it's going to look like. So you can see the loading animation, and of course you can customize this and set this to whatever you want, but I think that this is really nice. So I'm going to keep it like that. But now if we remove that from there, we can see the loading animation in here instead of the login page that we had, or section. But I'm going to put this in here. One down, same goes with that. And let's actually fix one small thing, and that would be inside of the login. So let's do that. And here we have our set section, set user, and let's also put the loading inside, or not the loading, but set loading. So we have our props, set section, set user. Let's add our set loading in here. So if we go to our login, in here we can set our loading be true. And then here, set section, set loading. And now if we sign out, so application, remove our token, refresh, it's going to be loading. So I forgot to fix something in here, and that would be to set loading to be false. But now if we refresh, it's going to be stuck on loading for some reason, which is pretty funny. And that's because this should be inside of an else statement that we have inside of the get token. So else, we're going to put the set loading in here, and now this should be working. So refresh, and then we can see the set loading just for a split second, and then we are in our login section. So if we log in, we can see the loading animation, and then it's going to be stuck on loading. So to fix that, where we have our use effect, what we're going to do is also add set section in here. So you'll see what I mean in a second. So we can add our section. So whenever the section changes, then we're going to run this use effect, but also whenever we load in. So if we refresh now, it's going to work, but let's remove our token and try again. So web dev withdrawn, 1, 2, 3. And so our loading finally works. And now that we have our loading finally out of the way, let's work on our sign up, and then we can finally work on the actual to do. So we are going to go back in here, close everything that we are not going to need other than the source, of course. And then here we are going to copy the login and rename that to sign up. And of course, we are going to be changing a few things as always. So we're still going to be getting our user and all of that kind of stuff. But down here, we are also going to be getting a name. So let's check if we have a name in our user over here, and we don't have a name. So let's go ahead and add our user, or actually let's not have this user work with that one. So what I'm going to do is remove that, and we're also going to be removing the password, since all that we're going to have is the name, and we're also going to be getting the to-dos, right? So here we're going to go to login, and we're going to remove this user. So we're going to be creating the user, of course, the URL. What we're going to do for that is in the app, we are going to have one for the URL, and that will be user.url. And then in here, we're going to be getting the URL. You can also name this domain or whatever you want, but now instead of writing user.url, we can just write the URL, and that will work fine. So just to make sure that this works, let's remove the token, refresh, try this. Log in, everything works perfectly well. So now same thing for the sign up. Here we're not going to be getting the user or the set user. We're only going to be getting the URL, which means that here we are going to have our own user with a name, which we're going to create an input for in just a second, and then the URL. So now this will also just change to URL, and this will go to sign up, which of course we haven't created yet. This will change to sign up, and then let's copy this div in here, paste it above, and then we're just going to change this to name. Same goes with all of these ones. So from email, this will all change to name. This will also change to name. Same goes with this, and also this right here. And that should be pretty much it. So let's go to the index.js file. I'm gonna import sign up, and we have to change this page. So this will be export default function page. This will be the same thing. So to fix that, let's change this to const login, and then at the very bottom here, we're going to export default login. See if that worked. Same goes for sign up. Now if we go to sign up, const sign up, change this to an arrow function, and then at the very bottom here, we're going to export it. So export default sign up, just like that. Now, if we go inside of the app.jsx, login, sign up, and then if we go down in here, we're going to create another one, which would be sign up, and we are going to run sign up. And to actually open sign up, we're going to have to go inside of the login, and where we don't have an account, we have our href. So right over here on click, we're going to set the section. So let's do that. Set section to be sign up, and then it will change it to sign up. Same goes for the login in here. So we can change this to already have an account. This will change to login, and then on click, set section to login. And let's see how that works. So let's refresh. Sign up is going to go to sign up, and login is going to go back to login. And this section is going to be a little big just because of the amount of inputs and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't really matter. It's going to change the size of the actual section too. So let me just show you that. If we go, this is the to-do section. So if we go in here and run npm run build, wait for this to complete, we go to extension, update. If we go to our sign up, we can see that it doesn't make too much difference, a little bit larger, but doesn't make too much difference. And here's going to be our to-dos. We're going to be adding some padding here so that doesn't look like this, but we're going to fix that after you're done with our sign up. So now that we have all of the components working, let's work on the API. So we have our next to-do list in here, API. We're going to create a folder called sign up. Here we're going to copy this, paste it in here. This is going to be our sign up. Pretty much everything is going to stay the same. Other than this, we're going to move the response.cookies.set, and where we have our message, we're also going to be sending in the token data, just like we did in the login. So token data, and let's go back to the extension. This is our sign up. So if we go up in here, sign up, everything should be working. So let's refresh, sign up. I'm going to create a new user. So let's just say bob@gmail.com. 1, 2, 3, and we have to change this to sign up also. I just realized, but let's take a look at our console. When I press on this, everything works. And if I go in here, we do have our token saved. And also if we refresh our database, the new user bob@gmail.com was created with the 4 default to-dos. So let's actually go ahead and delete both of these users. And I'm going to zoom out in here, or actually zoom back in and refresh. We can see that we're going to be getting an error because the user doesn't exist anymore. So to fix that, we can go back in here, we can go back to the app.jsx. If we're getting an error, then what we're going to do is we are going to remove it. So where we have get token, we are also going to set token, and then right in here, we're going to set our token to be blank, and then the expiration date to be -1. And now if we refresh, go to application, we have no more token, and then if we refresh again, then it's going to go back to login. So what we can do is we can set loading to be false, and that should fix everything. So if we sign up, web dev with Ron, 1, 2, 3, this is going to be my new user. Also in the sign up, I forgot to change the button again. So this will be sign up, or this will say login, but this will be sign up. And then if we go and remove the user, so refresh, delete the user, refresh, and we can see that we go straight back to the login. But let's just sign up again so that we actually do have a user. 1, 2, 3, sign up, and here's our to-dos. But now that we have our sign up and login working, last thing that we have to do is actually work on the to-do list. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is go in the app.jsx, scroll down to our section, to-do list, and right over here, we're going to be passing in the props. You can also just pass in the user, which will be user. You can go to the to-do list. Here we're going to be getting our set section, and we're also going to be getting the user. And right over here, let's console log to make sure that we're actually getting the user. So I'm going to open the console in here. We're going to be getting our object with the name and also the to-dos. And what we're going to be doing here is creating a use state for the to-dos since we don't actually need the user. So right over here, I'm going to actually zoom in. Here we're going to write to-dos and then set to-dos, which will be use state. And that's going to be an object with 2 arrays. So the first one is going to be our incomplete to-dos and also our complete to-dos. And our incomplete to-dos is going to be set to the user.todos. And our complete is going to stay blank. So now we can scroll down to our to-do over here and create both of our mapping methods. So we're going to start with our complete ones since they're going to be at the very top. So todos.complete.map. Here we're going to be getting the ID and also the to-do. Add another round bracket here, but for every to-do, we're going to be returning a to-do with a key of _ID. and we're going to be passing in the props, which we're going to create right over here. So const props. Here we're going to be passing in the ID, the to-do, the to-dos, set to-dos, and then also done, which in this case is going to be true. I'm going to actually full screen this, and I'm going to copy this. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to fix this a little bit so this look a little bit nicer. What I'm going to do is copy this, paste it under, and we're going to change this to incomplete. And here we're going to set done to be false. Now we have one more thing to do, and that would be to go to our to-do, get our props, and fix everything that we need to fix. So ID, to-do, to-dos, set to-dos, and of course done. For the span, here we're going to be writing the to-do. And let's make sure that everything works. So let's go back in here, and we can already see our to-dos. So these are going to be the default ones that are created. And of course, whenever we press any to do, nothing actually happens because we haven't added that functionality yet. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put this right over here. I'm going to move them side by side, just like this. And we're going to start by adding an on-click event listener right over here. So on click, we are going to run handle click. So handle click, which we're going to create above. So for the return, const handle click. And here the first thing that we're going to be doing is running our try and catch method, since we are going to be using Axios here. So console log the error, and here we're going to check if the user is not done, because that would mean that we would want to change it to be done. So of course here we're going to be setting incomplete to be todos.incomplete dot filter to do dot underscore ID. And if you do want a full walkthrough of how all this works, then make sure that you actually check out the video where we're actually making this, because of course this is just making a Chrome extension of our Next.js to-do list. So let's log in real quick. This is a mini version of this right over here. So of course, again, make sure you watch that video if you want a full walkthrough, but this is going to be our incomplete. And for the complete to-dos, this is going to be to-dos complete with our current to-do that we pressed on. And let's also console log this just so that you can see what's happening here. But I'm going to open the terminal, and if I press on a to-do, we can see that we do have 4 different to-dos, but now we're only going to have 3 other than the one that we just clicked, so that would be the first one. And now if I press on the second one, now we're only going to have 2, which is going to be the third and the fourth. So we're just filtering out all of the to-dos that we press on. Hopefully that makes sense, but I'm not sure why it just signed me out. So I'm going to log back in. Let's see what's going on in the application. So we do have a token, and when we reload, we still have a token. So we have run into some sort of issue. Open this right here. No errors. Let's check over here. Gonna console log get token. And for some reason, it's saying that we do not have a token. So what I'm going to do is re-log in. So let's try again. And now if I reload, everything's going to work. Okay, there we go. I'm not sure why that just happened, but let's go back to our to-do. And now we're going to import Axios from Axios, and right over here, or actually not here, but instead of the if statement, here we're going to write await axios.post http, or we can actually use the URL, which I'm not sure if we actually have that. So let's go back to our to-do list, and right over here, let's also add the URL. So user.url, same goes in here. Okay, now we're getting an error for some reason. So let's go back, and of course we're getting the error because we're just passing in this without naming the value. So user would be user.url, same goes in there. Our error is gone now, so we can go back to the to-do. Here we can also get our URL, but here we're going to be going to URL, and of course API, extension, to-do, and then remove. And we're going to get in there because this has to be an async function. Here we're going to be passing in our token. So not sure what happened here, but token is going to be get token, which we just had to import. But now we can go to our next to-do list. Right over here, instead of our to-dos, we're going to create a new folder called remove, and we can copy what we have in the get, paste it in here, and we're going to keep these 3 lines the same, actually this line also, but we're going to change one small thing, and that would be here we're going to be removing the to-do. And since we're not passing in the actual to-do, which we should be doing, and I forgot to do that, we're going to go back in here and then also pass in the ID of our to-do, so underscore ID. Now we can go back and to-do deleted successfully, but here we're going to be getting our token and then also underscore ID. And right over here, the first thing that we're going to do is create an object ID. So object ID, and you'll see why in a second, but new mongoose.types, object ID, make sure that it's imported. And then here what I'm going to do is actually console log our object ID. But before that, I'm going to console log user and then to-dos. Let's do the first one just so that you see what's happening here. But if I go back in here, refresh, and I press on our first to-do, inspect, make sure we don't get any errors, which we don't. Now if I go back in here, I forgot to add the underscore ID in here, so let's do that again. Going to refresh, press on our first to-do. Right over here, we can see that we have this new object ID, and these two actually do match. So if I do that, then they do match. But if we just console log the underscore ID here instead of creating this new mongoose types object ID, let's refresh, press on it again, we can see that this one is just going to be a string and this one is going to be a new object ID. So that's the reason why we had to do that. So hopefully you get the reasoning behind that. But here we're going to write user.todos. Here we're going to be changing the to-dos by using filter again. So user.todos.filter to do. And here we're going to write not to do dot underscore ID equals to object ID. And this is a different way of using filters. So it does the exact same thing. So if I log this user.todos and then also await user.save, you'll see what I mean by that. So if we press on our first one again, then we shouldn't see it in here anymore. And then since we saved it now, we shouldn't see it if we go back and refresh. So there we go, now it's gone, which means that our remove functionality actually worked. So we can go back to our to-do right over here. And I'm pretty sure we actually haven't even added an add to do functionality, which is pretty funny since we've already added one to remove it. So let's go ahead and work on that. Before we do, I just want to make sure that if we do remove one, so if I press on 2, we can see that it still stays here for some reason. And I think I know why this is happening. So we can still see everything, but we haven't added any CSS here that would put a line through it or any of that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is cut this out and then let's fix this. Paste it all in here again, but then right over here, I'm going to actually cut this out also. Here we're going to write if we're done, then we're going to add a line through. Else we're going to paste in all of this. We're also going to change the colors here a little bit. So background will be slate 800. And then on hover, we're going to change it to 900. So background slate 900. And I'm pretty sure we're only going to have 2 to-dos now. But if we press on a to-do, now we can see that it's complete. And if we reload, we're not going to see it anymore. But now let's go ahead and actually add the functionality to add our to-dos, which should have been the first thing that we should have added. So let's go back to the extension, close this, go to our to-do list, and here we're going to create a function called add to-do, which will be an async function, of course. And then we're going to have our try and catch method. Here we're going to console log the error. And one more thing also that we do need to add, which would be on key down, which would be another event listener. So on key down, here we're going to be getting the event. And then if, let's do it like this, if e.key equals to enter. So if we're pressing on enter, then we are going to add the to do. So add to do, and we can put this in one line. So this is going to be instead of having an add button, but instead of our function, the first thing that we're going to write is set input. If no input, as always, we will return. Then we're going to set input to be blank at the very end. So I'm just going to remove this for now, but we are going to create a new variable called new to do, and that will be our to do, which will be the input. And then it's going to have an underscore ID of new mongoose, which we have to import. So let's do it right over here. Import mongoose. So here we're going to write new mongoose.types.object ID. And then we're going to add our new to do inside of the incomplete to dos. So set to dos incomplete will be the exact same thing. So dot incomplete with our new to do. Then complete will be to do dot complete. And right over here, we're going to write await axios dot post. And of course, we have our URL. So user.url. Here we're going to be going to API to dos. and then add. Right over here, we're going to be passing in our token as get token and also the to do, or we can just pass in the new to do. Also, we do have to import our get token function. And for some reason, we're getting an error from Axios, so we do have to import it. And now we have to go back to our next to-do list and actually add an API endpoint for add. So for that, let's copy our get folder and paste it in our to-dos folder. I'm going to change this to add. And so right over here, we do have to add a few more things. But before we do that, let's actually also get our new to-do from here. So new to-do. And then right over here, we're going to be adding this new to-do inside of the user.todos. So user.todos is going to be previous user.todos with our new to-do. And then await user.save. So now all of this should be working. Here we can write to-do added successfully, but we're not actually returning a response, or we're not getting a response. So we're just passing in our new to-do and token, and we're not creating a variable. So we're not going to get any console logs from this, but everything should be working. Let's take a look at our error. So failed to resolve import mongoose, which means that we have to install it. So terminal, open a new one, npm install, or not install, but npm install mongoose. Let's clear everything, refresh, and now our error should be gone. If we try to add a new to-do, so hello, for example, there's going to be our new to-do, and let's see, we're not getting any errors in here, but if we refresh, our to-do stays here, and we do also have to clear out our input. So let's add our set input, and I'm actually going to put it right over here before we set our to-dos. So let's try writing some gibberish. We can see that our to-do gets added, and then if we refresh, it still stays there, so everything works out. And there is another thing that we do also have to add. So whenever we press on a to-do, we should be able to undo our to-do. So if, for example, I pressed on this one by accident and I want to undo it, we can't do that right now because we haven't added that yet. So let's go ahead and work on that. So we're going to go back to the to-do, and right over here in the if statement, we're going to say else. That means that it's already done, and we pressed on it again, which means that we just have to undo everything. So here we're going to write set to-dos. Here we're going to add this inside of the incomplete. So ... to-dos incomplete, and then we're going to add our to-do. Now for the complete, we're going to filter this one out of there. So complete.filter to-do, and then to-dos._id doesn't equal to id. So we're just doing the exact opposite as we're doing right over here. And then of course we have to save this. So await axios.post, and we are going to use the to-dos add for this one. So let's add our URL and then API extension to-dos add, and right over here we're going to be passing in the token, which will be get token, and then also our new to-do, which will be our _id. So let's see if that worked out. If we press on this, we can see that it gets undone, and if we reload, it still stays here. So all of that worked. And now that we have all of our main functionality done, we are going to add some padding also to our H1, and we're going to add two buttons here, one to sign out and the other to actually open this page right over here. So let's go and add the padding real quick. So right over here, all I'm going to do is add a py of 1, and that should add that little bit of padding, but that looks much better. Let's actually add those SVGs that we have over here. So one's going to be the URL and the other one's going to be the sign out. So, and those two are actually going to be right over here. So at our to-do list, at the very top with our H1. So let's create the div. Actually, we can paste in the py in there. Class name, py, and we're also going to add a px of 4 here, but we're going to put the H1 in here. And here we're going to start with our sign out. So sign out. And the only reason we can just say -sign out is because it's in the public folder, which means that we can do the exact same thing for our URL SVG over here, but the alt is just going to be sign out. Here, let's add some properties. So we're going to have width of 24. Same goes for the height. Then we're going to have a class name of relative, float, and cursor will be pointer. And then we can also change the brightness a little bit. So brightness to be 90. And then on hover, we can change the brightness to 100. So brightness 100. And then we're also going to add a transition of all, which we'll add a pre-nice transition. And also we're going to add a margin top of 2. So let's go back here, and this is what it's going to look like. So if you actually take a close look, you can see the color change just a little bit. If you want to see a larger change, we can set this to maybe 50, or not 500, but 50. And when we hover it, we can see that it's going to have this nice transition to a lighter color, but I might just keep it at 80. Yeah, that's good enough. And here, before we add the other button, let's add the actual functionality to sign out. So here we can write on click. We're going to create a function for that, but handle sign out, which is going to be somewhere over here. So add to do. Let's create the sign out. So handle sign out. And this does not have to be an async function, just because we can remove the cookies and that will do everything else for us. So it's going to be very simple. Set token. Token will be blank, and the days is going to be -1. And then we can also set the section to be login, and that should be it. So if we press on the button now, we can see that we get signed out. And if we try to look for any cookies, it's gone. So let's log in just to show you how this works. I'm gonna make this smaller. Log in. Take a close look at our cookie over here. If I press on the sign out and refresh, our token disappears. But now that our sign out button works, let's add the one that actually opens our actual page over here. And to add our other image, we can actually go ahead and paste it at the very top here. And all that we're going to change is going to be, we're going to change that to URL. This will be 20 by 20. And then the margin top here is going to change to 2.5. And when we press on it, we are going to open tab with the user.url. And this is going to be a function that we are going to be importing from our helpers. So let's create it real quick. Open tab.js. And then let's create it. So open tab, and then let's export it. We're going to go inside of the index.js file. We're going to import it here, open tab, and we're going to add it inside of our export. Now, if we go in here, we can actually import it. So there it is, open tab. But again, it's not going to do anything because we haven't added any functionality, but here it is. Let's change from float end to float start. Now it's going to be on the left. Let's go to our open tab. And over here, we're going to be actually communicating to our background.js file by sending a message. So I'm not going to go in too much depth of how this works because, again, I have a separate video on how all of this stuff works. But the first thing that we're going to do is write chrome.runtime.sendMessage. And then here we're going to set the action to be what we want to do. So in this case, that would be open new tab. And this doesn't have to be action. This could be anything. This is like our API endpoint. So this right over here, it could be anything you want. And we're going to be passing in the URL, which we're getting from here. But now we can go to our background.js file. And here we're going to write chrome.runtime.onMessage. So if we go in here, we can see that we're sending a message inside of our open tab. But in this case, we are receiving a message. Add listener. Here we're going to be getting our message and a few other things which we're not going to need, so there's no need to get them, but I can show you what they are. We get a sender and then also a response that we can set. So send response, but we're not going to be using them, so we don't need them. And this should be curly brackets instead of square brackets. Here we're going to be checking if our message.action equals to open new tab. So we can go ahead and copy this, paste it in here. But if that's true, then here we're going to write chrome.tabs.create. And then this is where we are opening a new tab. So the URL will be the message.url. And also we can just paste it in here just like this. And this should work now. So let's refresh. And if we press on it, we should be getting some sort of error. So there it is. But if we actually run npm run build and open this as a Chrome extension, this functionality should be working. So let's wait for this to complete. There it is. Let's go to extensions update our extension. Let's log in, password. Here's our to-do list. We can see both of our buttons on the sides, and if we press on this now, we can see that it opens our localhost 3000. So if you change this to anything else, we can go to app.jsx. So if you change the URL to something else, for example, this right over here, and we paste this in here. Of course, all of our APIs now are not going to work. So what I'm going to do is actually just go back to the background.js in case we have to log in again. I'm just going to set the URL to be this, just to show you how this works. npm run build, shouldn't take too long. And now we can go back in here, update it, and if we press on our link again, we can see that it's going to open this GitHub repository. So whatever link you put in here, it's going to open it, which is why we put the URL. But now if we do sign out over here, and for example, we do open our page, yeah, I do have to run npm run build again. So let's do that to fix it. Let's update our extension. But if we open our page now and we're signed out, we are going to have to log in again. So one thing that you can do is actually pass in the cookie that we have from here into our page by creating a content script, which I actually haven't added inside of the manifest.json files. But if you do want to do that, then of course you're welcome to do your own research and find ways to do it, but it shouldn't be too difficult since you can already use the setToken.js function that we have in here, but inside of the content script. But this is pretty much just going to be it for our to-do list. So again, let's just walk through, make sure that everything works. Let's do bob@gmail.com, sign up. Here's our to-do list. Of course, everything should be working, but if we do try to log in with our bob@gmail.com in here, there should be an account. So there it is. Of course, everything that we do here is going to show in here. So now we can see that it's gone. But if we update this, go back in here, again, everything gets updated. We can open our page, we can sign out. And of course, all of the different functionalities that we've added also work in the Chrome extension. And so of course, this is going to be it for this video. So I really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you learned something new, then make sure to leave a like, subscribe to this channel to not miss any upcoming content like this. Go down below if you have any questions or if you have anything else that you'd like to say, and hopefully see you in the next video.